On Mother's Day, the whole family plays out an intervention. I'm an alcoholic. I'm embarrassing them. I'm toxic, and if you don't sign a treatment agreement, we won't talk to you anymore. The agreement transfers my land in Texas to my son for temporary management, and he was already planning to resell it. This isn't a joke. It's a trap disguised as care. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I'm 66 years old, a retired school counselor with 2 adult children who should have known better. I make a mean banana bread. I still do my own oil changes because Daddy taught me to, and unless Merlot counts as a vegetable, I don't have a drinking habit. I have a habit of saying exactly what I think, and at my age, that's practically a superpower. The land, 40 acres outside of Seguin, came from my father. It's scrubby live oak and a creek that only remembers it's a creek after a good thunderstorm. There's a rusty windmill and, if you squint, the foundation of the farmhouse that burned before I was born. To anyone else, it looks like rough pasture. To me, it looks like every summer of my childhood, all sunburn and freedom. My son, Mark, is 38 with good hair and expensive belts. He can sell a screen door to a submarine, as my mother used to say. He's in property solutions, which, near as I can tell, means he moves paper and calls it progress. My daughter Emily is 35 and kinder than the world deserves. She teaches 2nd grade and still calls me before she tries a new recipe, like I invented casseroles. For Mother's Day, they planned brunch at my house, frittata, fruit salad, the whole Pinterest. Mark's wife Tasha set out a vase of hot pink roses. My grandsons played with the dog, and for 15 minutes I thought, this is nice. Then Mark cleared his throat like a man about to announce the second coming, and everything turned to ice. "Mom," he said, "we love you." Nothing good ever follows that particular preamble. I sat back with my coffee and waited. He had a folder in front of him. Emily stared at the table. Tasha folded her hands like a flight attendant demonstrating where the exits are. "We're here," Mark continued, "because your drinking is out of control." I almost laughed. Out of control? I drink 2 glasses of wine a week, 3 if it's been one of those weeks when the toilet runs and the cat throws up on the rug. But I didn't laugh. I looked at Emily. Her eyes were shiny. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "Out of control," I repeated. "Is that so?" "Mom," Tasha said and put her hand on my forearm like she was soothing a horse. "We noticed the slurring, the forgetfulness. I wear bifocals, that's not slurring, that's me reading the back of the baking powder can." Mark slid the folder across the table. "We wrote out a treatment plan. It's standard. You'll sign, we'll get you into a safe environment, and we'll handle the stressors. You shouldn't be worrying about property. The land it's a lot to manage. Let me step in, temporarily, just till you complete the program." You ever feel the temperature in your chest drop 10 degrees? I flipped the folder open. The first page was some pop psych nonsense pulled off a blog. Signs of alcohol use disorder in older adults. The second page had a place for my signature. It used a lot of words like temporary appointment and best interests. I kept reading and found a bone buried right in the middle. A durable power of attorney that wasn't the temporary, limited thing it pretended to be. The land was explicitly listed for management, sale, encumbrance, or transfer. There was a notary block ready to go, and another page stapled in with a blank line for an asking price. I looked up. "A safe environment," I said, "like rehab." Mark nodded, solemn. "We've already called around. We found a place with an opening today." "Today?" I said. "Happy Mother's Day to me." Emily finally spoke. "We just want what's best. You've been different." "Different how?" "Snippy," she said softly, "and you forgot my parent-teacher night." "I had the stomach flu," I said, "and I brought you flowers every other time." We're not trying to fight, Mark said. We're trying to solve a problem before it gets worse. So I sign, I said, tapping the page, and I go to their resort with a juice cleanse, and you, my boy, become lord of the 40 acres? It's just temporary, he said quickly. We can't have you stressing about taxes and squatters. Squatters? I said, what, the deer unionized? Tasha let out a careful breath. This is a loving boundary, Linda. I hate that phrase, loving boundary. It's usually code for, I'm going to do what I want and pretend it's for your own good. I stood up to refill my coffee, gave myself an extra second to think, and when I sat down, I smiled the way Southern women smile when they're deciding whether to pass the biscuits or the judgment. Let me get my readers, I said. In the bedroom, I shut the door and dialed voice memos. Texas is a one-party consent state, and before anyone clutches pearls, I wasn't recording for kicks. I was documenting what smelled like elder financial abuse. When I came back, I set my phone on the table like I always do, screen down, and slid the pages around with my thumbnails like an old hen fluffing her feathers. Mark, I said, what happens if I don't sign? He stared at me for a beat, and then his face did something ugly. Then we'll have to protect ourselves and the kids. Mom, we can't be around you when you're like this. It's toxic. Toxic, I repeated. I'm toxic? Emily twisted her napkin. Please don't make this hard. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I asked for a pen. And here's where the part of me that worked as a counselor for 30 years showed up. I wrote notes in the margins like I was grading a book report. Next to temporary, I wrote define equals specific date. Next to best interests, I wrote whose. Next to sale, I wrote no. And then I picked up the folder and said, I'll be taking this to my attorney. If this is so standard, she'll tell me to sign. That's not necessary, Mark said. We already have a notary waiting in the car. I smiled. Of course you do. Mom, sweetheart, I said, and set my coffee down. If I'm such a dangerous lush, you shouldn't mind if I sleep on it, right? He hesitated. He had a timeline. I could see it behind his eyes, little gears whirring. The bed is made, I said, and I even have a suitcase. I'll come quietly to your juice spa tomorrow if my attorney says this is a good idea. And if she doesn't, well, I guess we'll have to talk like adults. Mark and Tasha exchanged a look. Emily looked like she wanted to bolt. Finally, Mark said, Fine, tomorrow. Tomorrow, I repeated, and tucked the folder under my arm like it was the Sunday paper. They left with the roses in a vase, which I found tacky, and a lot of wounded silence. I locked the door, made myself tea, chamomile, not that anyone asked, and called the only person who could talk faster than my son, my neighbor and friend Sandra. Sandra is 70, retired paralegal, and allergic to nonsense. Bring the papers, she said, and bring cookies. By sundown, we were sitting at her kitchen table with a red pen, a highlighter, and a bowl of oatmeal raisin I'd fished out of the freezer. She read each page twice. This isn't a treatment plan, she said finally. It's a power grab with pretty ribbon. I thought so, I said. We need an attorney, she added. I have Janice Marino, the elder law wizard from New Braunfels. Sandra nodded approvingly. Call her, now. Janice answered on the third ring like she'd been expecting me. Linda, she said, what did your charming boy try? By noon the next day, so much for rehab check-in, I was in Janice's office, a tidy suite with diplomas on the wall and a cactus in the window that looked like it had survived several divorces. She read the folder, then leaned back and steepled her fingers. Well, she said, I've seen more subtle attempts. He's not even hiding the sale provisions.
I thought maybe I was reading too much into it, I said, and then I laughed, because if there's one thing I've learned in my 60s, it's that my gut is hardly ever wrong. You're not, she said, and you're not the first mother to get this treatment. People think elder means easy target. I'm not easy. Ask my ex-husband. Janice smiled. Here's what we're going to do. First, no signing anything. Second, we place the property somewhere safe so even a determined son with the notary can't put his hands on it. Third, we gather evidence. If he's already made moves to sell, we document. And then we make sure that legally and loudly he learns a lesson you can't teach with a wooden spoon. I like you, I said. What's somewhere safe? A trust, she answered. A revocable living trust with you as trustee today and your successor trustee, not your son. Or, because I have a mean streak when it's warranted, we could set up a conservation easement. Once that's recorded, even the devil would need a variance.
I pictured Mark trying to argue with the Texas Land Conservancy and felt a little sorry for the boy. Would that keep it in the family? I asked. Better, Janice said. It keeps it in the world, on your terms. And we'll write your will with a no contest clause that triggers if anyone challenges. We'll also prepare a cease and desist for anyone marketing property you own without your consent. If he's already listed it, the paper trail will light up like a Christmas tree. Think he would? I asked. Janice raised an eyebrow. You tell me. I told her about the notary in the car, the way he said temporary, like it was a magic word. I told her how he used my love for my grandsons like a wrench. People who say temporary with their hand out don't mean temporary, she said. Let's see what the county clerk has to say. By 3 o'clock, we were staring at the Guadalupe County records on Janice's computer. Nothing had been recorded. Yet. That's good, Janice said, but listings don't show up here. Sandra, can you text your niece at Hill Country Title? I want to know if there's a preliminary file open. Sandra, whose network could find you a title officer in under 4 minutes, sent a flurry of messages. Janice drafted the trust documents and asked me about beneficiaries. Not Mark, I said, and hated that it felt like swallowing a burr. Emily's steady, and my granddaughter Lily. She's 11 and has a heart the size of Texas. But I don't want this to be a bone they gnaw on after I'm gone. If we can protect the land and still leave something of value, that's exactly what a conservation easement does, Janice said. You'll keep the property, you and then Emily and then Lily. You'll also get a tax deduction because you'll be donating certain development rights. And it means if Mark tries to flip it to a developer, the developer will laugh him out of the room. Sandra's phone dinged. They've got a pre-title file open under your legal description, she announced, eyes wide. Initiated by Ridgeline Real Estate Group. Contact T. Henson. Janice smiled like a cat. So the boy's already measuring curtains. Let's ruin his shopping trip. I sipped my tea and let the anger move through me slow and clean. It wasn't the kind that makes you shout. It was the kind that makes you careful. That night, I posted a photo of the creek on Facebook with the caption, "Some things you can't buy twice." It was petty. It felt good. At 9 the next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. Hi, Linda. Travis with Ridgeline. I might have a buyer interested in 40 acres out your way. Heard you might be looking to lighten your load. Can we chat? Bless his heart. I called Janice. She said, perfect. Call him back. Sound curious. Say nothing definitive. Get him to send an email with details. We want him on record. Price, timeline, and who told him you were selling. So I called Travis and played the nice older lady who doesn't know the difference between net to seller and no thanks. He was syrupy. He was confident. He mentioned an investor who could close in as little as 10 days and pay cash. He asked about access, water, utilities.
Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Travis," I said, sweet as pie, "how did you hear I was selling?" He hesitated just long enough. "Oh, I know your son, Mark. Good guy. He's helping you manage the property. Said you were ready. I can send over an agreement this afternoon." "Please do," I said, my stomach flipping like a cheerleader. I forwarded the email to Janice, who forwarded it to Hill Country Title, who forwarded it to a woman named Anita, who could shut a file down with her pinky. And while that chain reaction began, Janice walked me through the signing of my trust, the recording of a deed transferring the property from me to the Linda Ruth Caldwell Living Trust. I like my full name on serious things. And the conservation easement preliminaries. We scheduled a visit with the land trust folks who actually walk your property and make sure you're not trying to donate a parking lot. They're thorough. I respect that. Then I called Emily. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "I'm fine," I said. "Are you?" Silence at the end of the phone tells you a lot. "I don't like fighting with you," she said. "Me neither. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer me like you'd want Lily to answer you when she's grown." "Okay." "Did you know your brother planned to sell the land?" She gasped, a soft, involuntary sound. "He said temporary management. He told a realtor I was ready to sell. He opened a file with a title company."
"I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, "and I want you to hear me. I'm not mad that you were worried about me. I'm mad that he weaponized that worry. There's a word for what he tried to do to me. It's called undue influence. It's called elder financial exploitation, and I am not going to let him do it to me or to anyone else's mother." She started crying. I let her. Then we made a plan for her to bring Lily over for spaghetti and garlic bread, comfort food with a side of gumption. 2 hours later, Mark called. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Mom," he said, all wounded son, "we had an agreement." "No," I said, "you had a fantasy." "How far did you get, sweetheart? Did your realtor promise you a cash buyer today or tomorrow?" He went quiet. "You talked to Travis." "I sure did. And Janice and Hill Country Title were a regular knitting circle." He started speaking faster. "This is why we're worried about you. You're paranoid. You're involving strangers. Attorneys, not strangers. And you're involving notaries who sit in cars on holidays. Tomato, tomato. You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "We just wanted to protect you." "From what?" I asked. "From owning what I own? From remembering who raised you?" He hung up on me. That used to make me cry. At 66, it made me hungry. I reheated leftover frittata and ate it standing at the stove. Because sometimes a woman needs to feel her own heat. The next day, I got a certified letter. Mark's idea of a power move with postage. It was a notice of concern, citing my declining cognitive function and reinstating the offer to take control of my affairs. There were bullet points. There was even a list of incidents, like the time I forgot where I put the car keys. It read like a teenager's attempt at a book report for a book he hadn't read. I took the letter to Janice, who laughed so hard she had to fix her mascara. "She's making our case," she said. "Linda, how do you feel about a paper trail?" "I like scrapbooks," I said. "Good," she said, "because we're going to build one. We'll start with a formal revocation of any prior powers of attorney, just in case you ever signed something at a bank when you weren't looking. Then a cease and desist to Ridgeline. We'll copy the broker's broker and the board of realtors. We'll file a complaint with Adult Protective Services, not because I expect them to storm his house, but because I want a file with your name and the word exploitation on it in case he tries anything cute. And we'll
will send Mark a demand letter to preserve all communications, emails, texts, notes, smoke signals related to your property. If he deletes anything, that's its own problem. And the trust, I asked, will be recorded by Friday. And I do like the conservation easement idea. It's more permanent than a lecture. That Friday, I signed the trust papers with a pen that felt heavy in my hand. We recorded the deed at the county clerk's office, where the woman behind the counter recognized my last name and told me she used to know my daddy. I nearly cried in the hallway, not because I felt weak, but because my anger had somewhere to go that wasn't just my chest. Saturday, I drove out to the land with Sandra. We walked the fence line. We watched a pair of hawks draw lazy circles over the field, like the sky was theirs, which, to be fair, it was. We tucked a small, smooth stone under the windmill, the way Daddy used to, like a promise to come back. By Monday, the cease and desist reached Ridgeline. Travis called, all apologies and misunderstanding. We had no idea there was an issue. There isn't, because I'm not selling. Well, if you change your mind, I won't. And you should tell your investor to stop hovering. He coughed. We didn't say anything about an investor. Travis, I'm 66, but I'm not 6. He laughed awkward. Right, of course. Have a great day, ma'am. I was feeling almost buoyant when the next shoe dropped. It was a text from Emily. Mom, can we talk? Mark's posted on Facebook that you're unwell and he's taking steps. People at church are asking me if you're okay. I opened Facebook and there it was. A post with a soft focus photo of Mark, the kids, and a paragraph in which he asked for prayers because his sweet mom is struggling with alcoholism and denial, and he, as the eldest, must make hard choices. Over 100 comments, the usual soup of pity and piety. Some of those people had eaten my banana bread. I could have baked a brick.
I called Janice. Is there a polite word for what I want to do to him? I asked. Defamation, she said dryly. We can send a demand for retraction, but more importantly, this is good for us. Good? I said, because my pulse was in my ears. He's documenting his story in public, she said, and he didn't limit the audience. Screenshot everything. We'll add it to our scrapbook. The more he posts, the more he makes clear this is about control, not care. That night, I did something that would have terrified me 10 years ago. I went live. Emily had showed me how once, so I propped my phone on a stack of cookbooks, put on some lipstick, and told the truth. I didn't rant. I explained. I said I was blessed to have land from my father. I said my son had tried to trick me into signing it over under the guise of treatment. I said I was fine, that my doctor would vouch, my friends would vouch, and that if anyone wanted to bring me a casserole for my recovery, I'd take the recipe. I didn't mention Mark by name. I didn't have to. The comments were a stew, some warm, some spicy, a few bitter, but I felt like I'd opened a window in a room I didn't realize had gotten stuffy. The next morning, a letter arrived from a lawyer I didn't recognize, representing Mark. It threatened guardianship proceedings if I didn't voluntarily cooperate. Guardianship. My hands shook, then steadied. That was the nuclear option. It also requires proof, and I had piles of the opposite. I forwarded the letter to Janice, who called me back laughing again. I love when they send these, she said. Guardianship requires a physician's certificate. We'll get your doctor to write a capacity letter so strong it could lift a Buick. And if he files, we'll counter with your trust, your deeds, your bills paid, and your crossword puzzle record. Whatever you've got. Judges hate weaponized guardianships. He really thought I'd be scared, I said. That's because he's used to you loving him more than you love yourself, she said gently. And you still love him, but you love yourself enough to not hand him your life. I made an appointment with my physician, Dr. No, who has a voice like a bell and a stare that makes salesmen forget what they were selling. She ran me through a cognitive eval that would make Mensa frown, and she wrote the capacity letter with relish. She said, "You pass, with extra credit." "That's the only test I've wanted to pass since menopause," I said. On the way home, I stopped by the church office. Our pastor, Reverend Alice, is nobody's fool. I asked for 10 minutes and got 20. I told her what had happened and showed her the paperwork. She sighed and patted my hand. "Families," she said. "We do Bible verses at weddings, but we should hand out helmets." She promised to shut down the rumor mill. I told her she'd need a bigger bucket. For a week, things were quiet. I thought, maybe he's embarrassed. Maybe he's thinking. Maybe he'll apologize. Then Sandra texted a screenshot from a local Facebook group, looking for brush clearing crew near Seguin, large parcel under contract, need to move fast. The poster? T. Henson. I felt a slow smile spread across my face, like a dawn I'd waited for. I called Janice. "He's moving fast," I said. "Faster than his brain," she said. "Are you ready to put a bow on this?" "What's the bow?" I asked. "We're going to spring a little legal surprise at the title office he thinks will handle his closing. It will be educational for all involved. But we need one more thing. Proof he knew he didn't have authority. Not just the fact that he didn't, but that he knew it. That's the secret sauce." I remembered the voice memo on Mother's Day. Mark telling me that if I didn't sign, they'd cut me off. Mark insisting it was temporary with a notary in the car. Mark talking about rehab like he had a bus schedule. "I have something," I said. I sent the recording to Janice, who had a sound guy clean it up so that even a judge with a hearing aid could make out every burr and bless your heart. Then we wrote a letter to Ridgeline and Travis's investor, advising them that any attempt to purchase would be considered tortious interference because the property belonged to a trust and was subject to a pending conservation easement, and oh, by the way, the seller had no authority and had been told so. We CC'd High Country Title, Anita, and the broker's broker. You could hear the brakes screeching from my kitchen. Mark showed up that night on my porch, a cloud of cologne hitting the door before the bell did. I opened, let the storm door stay between us. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing?" "Baking bread," I said. "What are you doing?" "Why are you sabotaging me?" he demanded. And there it was, the mask falling off in one piece. "I'm not sabotaging you," I said. "I'm protecting me." "This is insane," he said. "You're letting strangers tell you how to run your life." "Janice is not a stranger," I said. "She's paid." He almost smiled. "That's the best joke you've made all week." "Come back when you've got something kind to say," I said, and I shut the door with the soft finality of a librarian closing a book no one will check out again. 2 days later, I was invited, politely, via email, to a seller meeting at Hill Country Title. I said I'd be delighted. Janice said she'd meet me there with a stack of documents and a lipstick that meant business. Sandra said she'd bring mints. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. Now, I'm a woman who irons her blouse when she's nervous. That morning, I ironed 2 and picked the one with tiny blue flowers because it made me look like someone's mama, in the delightful old-fashioned way. I wore my necklace with the little gold windmill charm, a gift from Emily, and put my papers in a canvas tote that said, "Be nice or leave." When I walked into the title office, Mark was already there with Travis and a man who looked like he bought towns the way I buy socks. He wore a crisp polo and the kind of watch that tells you what the market's doing.
Anita, the title officer, stood up from her desk with a face like she was about to see a play she'd heard was scandalous. "Mom," he said tightly, "thank you for coming." "Of course," I said sweetly. "I love field trips." Janice slipped in behind me, smiled at Anita like old friends, and took a seat. Sandra sat next to me, opened her purse, and put a mint on my notepad, like she used to put Band-Aids on scraped knees. Travis's investor, Mr. Watch, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Caldwell, we're pleased to—" "I'm Miss Caldwell," I said, "and you can call me Linda." He blinked. "Linda, then. We're excited about this opportunity. Beautiful parcel. We're prepared to move quickly." "I've heard that," I said. "From Travis, from my son, from the wind." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, let's get this done. You'll be so relieved." Janice slid a folder on the table. "Before we do anything," she said, "let's clear up a teensy tiny issue." Anita's eyes brightened. "I love teensy issues," she said in a tone that suggested she did not. Janice opened the folder, took out the recorded deed to the Linda Ruth Caldwell Living Trust, the trust certificate, and a letter from the land trust indicating we were in active negotiations for a conservation easement, and that any sale without their consent would violate the terms in motion. Then she produced the capacity letter from Dr. Ngo, a copy of the cease and desist, and, I admit I enjoyed this, the transcript from the Mother's Day recording. Linda owns nothing in her individual name. Her trust does. Linda is its trustee. It is not for sale. No one representing Linda has listed, marketed, or authorized a sale. If anyone has done those things, they have done so in a personal capacity, without authority, after being told in writing to stop. As of last Friday, anything recorded will be bounced by the clerk. Anything deposited will be returned by title. Anything signed will be void. Silence. The good kind. Mark looked at the ceiling like it had bail money. Travis's investor, Mr. Watch, frowned. Mark's knuckles went white on the table's edge. "You can't do this," he said. And when a grown man says that to his mother with a straight face, you know exactly how he grew up. "I just did," I said. He swallowed. "What about your drinking?" I set my elbows on the table and leaned in. "Mark, sweetheart," I said softly, "if your plan hinged on me being too drunk to read, I have horrible news." He glared at Janice. "We have rights as family." "You have love as family if you're lucky. Rights? Not to her property. Not like this." Mr. Watch gathered his pages. "Well," he said stiffly, "this has been enlightening." "You should vet your deals better," Anita said, and smiled with all her teeth. And he was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. I wish I could tell you he apologized right there, but if Mark had that gear, we wouldn't have parked in this lot. He threatened lawsuits, he threatened to go public, he called me ungrateful. I sat still and let the storm blow out. When he ran out of words, I stood.
"Son," I said, "I'm going home to make soup. You are welcome at my table when you can sit there without trying to pick my pocket." He didn't follow me. He didn't call that night. Emily did, crying again. This time for the brother she realized she didn't really know. "This is my fault," she said. "I should have asked more questions. I should have—" "You should have trusted your mother," I said gently. "Which you did. That's how we're okay." We made a new plan then, not about land or trusts, but about holidays, about strength, about who gets to define family after someone tries to burn the house down and calls it warmth. And because I'm me, because I've lived long enough to understand revenge is best served legal and room temperature, I pulled out the stack of printouts Janice had given me and started thinking about the next step. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The title office was a skirmish. What I had in mind next was a lesson. It was time to make sure he couldn't do this to any other woman with calloused hands and a soft heart. It was time to teach my son, and every would-be caretaker who confuses greed with concern, what happens when you try to trap a woman who grew up catching snakes with a stick and a coffee can. I didn't sleep the night before the title office meeting, not because I was scared, but because the kind of adrenaline that hits you at 66 comes wrapped in clarity. I lay there and made lists in my head. Pantry staples, people I could count on, things my father said that turned out to be true. I watched the green numbers of the clock roll over and thought about how a son learns to talk to his mother like she's an obstacle and not a person. Someone taught him. Maybe the world. Maybe me. Either way, I decided right then that whatever came next wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who's been told she's confused because she didn't nod fast enough. After Hill Country title, and the way Anita's smile suggested she wished she made popcorn for days like that, I drove home with Sandra riding shotgun, both of us loose and giddy in that post-storm way. She put a hand on my shoulder at a stoplight. "You were steady as a fence post," she said. "I've had practice," I said, and thought about PTA meetings, principals who thought they knew my job better than I did, and my divorce, back when you still had to explain why you were leaving a man who only liked you from the neck down. When we got to my house, there was a manila envelope leaning against the door. No return address, just my name and a handwriting I recognized. Tasha's, all tidy loops and patient curves. Inside was a note and a thumb drive. "Linda, I can't keep pretending I don't know what's happening. I didn't know about the notary until Mother's Day. I did know he was moving pieces with Travis before that, and I didn't stop him. That's on me. But last night he said something I can't get past. The email's on here. Read them. If you want to use them, I can't stop you. I won't stop you. I'm sorry for my part in this. T." I sat down hard on the top step, the envelope in my lap. Sandra hovered like a hummingbird. "Well?" she asked, and I handed her the note. We didn't say anything else. We went inside, made tea, rule 1 in any crisis, heat water, and opened the files. The emails were between Mark and Travis and a man with a domain that screamed Private Capital LLC. There were numbers, big ones that didn't smell like brush-clearing money. There was a phrase circled by Tasha in red, advance against expected proceeds. There was also an agreement attached, signed by Mark electronically, where he promised a finder's fee that would come out of his mother's sale, plus a personal guarantee on a short-term loan that had already been funded. Sandra squinted. "So your boy already borrowed against money he didn't have from property that wasn't his." I sipped my key and felt the anger slide back into its seat, and promised Travis a cut. "Bless their entrepreneurial hearts," she said. There was more. An email thread about optics around the intervention. Travis to Mark, "Make it soft. People eat up the 'we had no choice' angle." Private Capital to Mark, "Our investor wants a sure thing. Lockdown authority. Today is better than tomorrow." Then Tasha's own email to Mark from the night before the title office. "You're scaring me."
she'll hate us. He had replied with a line I could see with my eyes closed, she'll get over it. She always does. I forwarded the folder to Janice with the subject line, Gifts from the Universe. Within 15 minutes, my phone rang. I love it when the other side does my discovery for me, she said. Linda, how's your blood pressure? Normal, steady. Then let's escalate.
Now, let me explain something for anyone who hasn't had the joy of watching a smart woman from New Braunfels go to legal war. Janice wasn't looking for a fight. She was creating a record. That's different. A fight is noisy, dramatic. A record is a ladder, one you build rung by careful rungs so that when the time comes, you can climb where you need to go without slipping. We weren't just scorched earth blasting. We were landscaping. She drafted 3 things. First, a petition for a temporary restraining order and temporary injunction to keep Mark from holding himself out as my agent, from contacting potential buyers, and from publishing statements about my incapacity for financial gain. Second, a demand for retraction under our state's defamation laws, with a reminder that sometimes you can be wrong in public, but you can't be wrong in public on purpose when it costs someone money. Third, a notice of intent to seek sanctions if he filed a bad faith guardianship. I'm not trying to take his birthday, she said, her voice calm and a little amused, but I am going to take the fun out of this. Can we add a bow? I asked. We can, she said. What did you have in mind? I want to do something bigger, I said, so the next woman doesn't have to call you at noon on a Monday because her kids think she's an ATM with gray hair. Janice paused. There's a legislative hearing next month about revisions to the Estates Code. They're taking comments about elder financial exploitation and guardianship abuse. I laughed once, sharp. You want me to testify? I do, but that's a slow burn. The quicker, splashier thing? We hold a workshop. We invite every church ladies group and civic club within a 50-mile radius. We give them a packet, we teach them the signs, we give them scripts, we show them how to set up a trust before their sons get creative. I felt that click you get when a key fits. We do it at my church, I said. Reverend Alice will host. She's sore at him for using prayer like a press release. And we call the news, Sandra added, because God love her, she understands the difference between noise and amplification. You're okay with being public? Janice asked gently. I already went live, and I'm too old to be scared of gossip. Let people think I'm fierce. They'll be right. We set the workshop for 2 Saturdays out. In the meantime, the wheels kept turning. Dr. Ngo sent her capacity letter directly to the court with a copy to Mark's new lawyer, which I imagined landed in his inbox like a wet slap. APS opened a file, and the woman who came by my house spoke to me the way people speak when they've seen too many stories that don't end with a workshop. We had tea at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and she took notes on a yellow pad and nodded a lot and told me she wished more people had neighbors like Sandra. Emily came by in the afternoons, after school, with Lily in tow and her teacher bag dragging down one shoulder, full of laminated things and second-grade confidence charts. She kept apologizing. I kept cooking. It's how women in my family forgive, through food and folded dish towels and the stories we tell while we shell peas. On Wednesday, a constable knocked on my door with papers for a hearing. Mark had filed for temporary guardianship. My stomach did a little flip. Not fear, exactly. More like the tilt you get when a roller coaster ratchets up and you know the drop is coming, you just don't know when. I texted Janice. She sent back, "Good, now we get a judge. Wear blue, bring your patience." The morning of the hearing, I put on my blue blouse with the tiny flowers again. I wore my sensible heels and a necklace my mother wore when she needed nerves of steel. A little gold cross, nothing flashy, just solid. Janice met me at the courthouse with a rolling briefcase that looked like it could carry a semester's worth of hope. In the hallway, we saw Mark and his lawyer, a man with karst limestone hair and a tie that had been expensive last year. Tasha stood a little back, both hands around her purse strap, eyes red. She gave me a small nod. I nodded back.
We sat. The judge, a woman with her hair piled on her head like she hadn't had time for sentimentality in 20 years, took the bench. She looked at the stack of papers like they were a puzzle she could solve before lunch. Mark's lawyer went first. He talked about patterns and concern and increasing isolation. He did not mention Travis or private capital or the emails. He did not mention a notary in a car on Mother's Day. He did mention my Facebook Live like it was a sign of impulsivity.
When it was our turn, Janice stood and walked the judge through our ladder. The trust, the recorded deed, the conservation easement in progress, the capacity letter, the letters sent, the cease and desist, the screenshot of the prayer post with all its earnest punctuation, and finally, only when the judge had the whole frame, Tasha's thumb drive. Janice didn't look at Mark when she said, "Your Honor, we think this petition is less about protection and more about papering a sale that had already been promised." Then she asked, gently, whether the court would like to hear from me. I stood. My knees didn't knock. "Your Honor," I said, "I'm not here because I like fighting with my son. I'm here because if I don't draw a boundary, there won't be anything on my side of it." Then I handed up Dr. Ngo's letter, and because I am who I am, one of the crossword puzzles I'd finished in ink that morning, just enough cheek to make the bailiff snort before he turned it into a cough. The judge took off her glasses. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, and I felt every head in that room turn toward a son being asked to be a man. "Did you sign a contract with Ridgeline Real Estate to list your mother's property?" He shifted. It wasn't a listing, Your Honor. It was preliminary." "Did you borrow money against expected proceeds?" she asked. His lawyer jumped in. "Irrelevant to capacity, Your Honor." "Sit down," she said, not unkindly, and his lawyer sat. "Mr. Caldwell." Mark swallowed. "Yes, but—" "Thank you," she said. "Petition denied. Temporary guardianship is a serious remedy. It is not a shortcut to authority when Mom says no." She paused. Let that sink in. "And Mr. Caldwell, my court is not a stick you use to beat your mother into submission. If you file again without new and compelling evidence, we'll have a different conversation about sanctions." He nodded, small and stiff. I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge, because that's where my gratitude belonged. Then, because I am me, I asked, "Your Honor, may I say one more thing?" She tilted her head. "Briefly. I'm hosting a workshop in 2 weeks about exactly this kind of situation. You're welcome to send your staff. There will be cookies." The courtroom chuckled, in the way people do when relief knocks knees with delight. The judge's mouth softened. She said, "Post the flyer with the clerk. We'll make sure it's on the board." We walked out with the kind of quiet triumph that doesn't need a trumpet. In the hallway, Tasha touched my sleeve. "I'm so sorry," she said again, her eyes glossy. "Thank you for the thumb drive," I said. "He told me I was overreacting. He told me you'd get over it. I'm so tired of getting over things." I didn't hug her. She looked like the kind of woman who hadn't been hugged in the while. I hugged her anyway. "You don't have to get over this one. You get to move through it." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Back at home, we put our heads down and got practical. The land trust folks came out on a blazing afternoon, the kind of heat where the air looks like it's making decisions. 2 women and a man with clipboards and sun hats, earnest and careful and delighted by a creek that forgot itself most summers. They took photos for the baseline documentation, the windmill, the stand of big blue stem that made my heart stupid happy, and the old mesquite with the lightning scar. They asked me about Daddy, what he farmed, when he stopped, and what he told me about the land when I was too young to think in terms like stewardship. He said, "The dirt remembers, and if you're lucky, it remembers you kindly." They smiled like people who get it. We talked about easement terms, habitat, no new roads, limited fencing, no subdivision. We talked about tax deductions and appraisals and stewards and monitoring visits. It wasn't romantic, exactly. It was better. It was specific. In between paperwork and plans, I did the small things that keep you sane. Washed sheets, pruned tomatoes, found the one sock that had been missing for 3 months under the couch. I baked carrot cake for the workshop and froze it so I wouldn't eat half in a fit of nerves. I sat on my porch at night with the ceiling fan clicking and listened to the neighborhood breathe. The workshop came fast. We called it Hands Off Mom's Wallet, a practical guide to protecting yourself, because Sandra said if we called it anything else, the men would take the parking spaces and the women would stay home. Reverend Alice opened the fellowship hall on Friday so we could set up. We made stations, trusts, powers of attorney, real ones, narrowly tailored, beneficiaries, how to read a deed, how to spot a predatory care plan. Janice brought a stack of sample documents with the sensitive bits blacked out like a spy novel. Dr. and Go agreed to do a Q&A about capacity with a list of questions I would have paid to hear answered in my 50s. The APS worker said she'd attend in plain clothes and hand out a card quietly to anyone who asked.
She showed up with a face that said she hadn't slept well since her wedding. We sat at my kitchen table, the one that's seen more life than most therapists. She told me how the money they were spending wasn't money they had, how the house had a HELOC he didn't tell her about, how that investor was actually an old football friend who had a business model that could charitably be described as the Wild West. She told me that when she pushed back, Mark told her she was ungrateful and negative and not team family. I thought I married the guy who picked up my grandma's walker when she dropped it, she said, tears pooling. But he's in love with winning, and he thought you were a game. I handed her a tissue. Some people win at work and lose at home, I said. It's a choice they don't know they're making until it's all they have. She told me that he's going to sue you for slander because of the workshop, she said. He can't, I said, gentle, not mocking. Truth is a defense, and I never said his name. I know, she said. I need to know I'm not crazy. You're not crazy. You're just tired of living in a house where you can't set anything down without someone moving the meaning. She stayed 2 hours. We made lists, logins, statements, copies of copies. I told her to put $500 in an account he didn't know about and to see a counselor who wasn't on their insurance. I told her to get a P.O. box and to forward anything with his name on it there, because if this thing went the way a lot of things go, she'd need a place for paper to land that wasn't her porch. When she left, the house felt quiet in that particular way silence takes when it follows confession. I stood at the sink and watched a cardinal peck at the bird feeder Daddy built in 1984, the year my marriage started to wobble. The dirt remembers. The birds remember. My bones remember. And I realized then that revenge, good, clean, legal revenge, isn't about making someone hurt. It's about making them face you, the real you, the one they dismissed because you were soft and busy and convenient. 2 days later, we had our hearing on the injunction. Same judge, same courtroom, different energy. When Janice finished laying out the new evidence, emails, the news story, the workshop flyer with the church address stamped on the back like a benediction, the judge looked at Mark with a weariness I recognized from faculty meetings in 1993. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "have you apologized to your mother?" He swallowed. "No, Your Honor." "Do that," she said. "Not because I tell you to. Because it's the decent thing. Injunction granted. Attorney's fees to Miss Caldwell." She banged her gavel like a woman swatting a fly and turned to the next case. Outside, under the pecan trees that guard the courthouse like old men on a porch, Mark approached me. He was careful, like I might break or bite. "Mom," he said. The word sounded strange in his mouth. It used to be home. Somehow it had become a tool. "Yes," I said, and I didn't soften my gaze. He looked at Janice, at Sandra, at Tasha, who had come as moral support but stood on the sidewalk like a woman with her own plans. He said, I shouldn't have done it like that. Each word a pebble. Like what? I asked. Like I'm a problem to solve? Like love is leverage? He flinched. I thought you weren't going to use it anyway, the land. I thought you'd be happier without the stress. It's funny, I said, how people are always certain you want to give up the things they've already decided to take. He said nothing. Then he said, I'm sorry. The words were quiet. They didn't look at me. They hovered between us like a moth near a porch light, not sure where to land. I appreciate that, I said, because my mother raised me to be polite even to men who weaponize holidays. Now go make it mean something. He nodded and walked away, and for the first time since this started, I felt tired enough to nap in public. And I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because here's what none of those men with their LLCs and their eager watches knew. Daddy didn't buy that land from a developer on a whim. He got it from a man who owed him money, sure, but he also got it with a story. The story was written into the old deed, a handwritten addendum I remembered from a summer day when Daddy let me sit on the tailgate and play with a notary stamp while he told me that promises on paper matter more than promises in mouths. The addendum was buried under 3 transfers and a lot of dust, but it was there. It said that if the Coldwell land was ever threatened by a road expansion, the county had to pay for a culvert and a fence and a footbridge because the original owner's wife used to walk to the creek every evening, and no man with a truck was going to tell her she couldn't. It was a lovely, stubborn little paragraph, and it meant something. The people who loved that place built it to be hard to break.
Janice called me that night with a smile in her voice. The Board of Realtors opened an investigation on Travis, she said, and Private Capital sent a letter that, if I were a betting woman, tells me their investor wants out of Mark's orbit. How's Tasha? I asked. She retained a very good lawyer, Janice said, and she's sleeping at her sister's. I breathed out. What next? Next, Janice said, we hold the declaratory judgment hearing in 2 weeks. We make the injunction permanent, and we finish the conservation easement. We'll be done before Halloween. He'll move on to a project that listens to him better. I don't think this is over for him, I said softly. Oh, I know it isn't, she said, but it's over for you in the way that matters. He doesn't get to write your story. That night, after dishes and feeds and a quiet house, I turned on my voice memos and said out loud the thing I hadn't let myself say. I love my son. I do not love who he is with me. It's a clean sentence. It made the air feel wider. 2 mornings later, a big white envelope arrived by certified mail. It was from a law firm with a name that sounded like a fraternity. Inside was a demand for payment of monies advanced to Mark, with a delightful paragraph threatening to place a lien on the subject property if I didn't negotiate in good faith. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I forwarded it to Janice and to Anita at Hill Country Title with the subject line, "The Nerve." Janice responded, "This is my favorite. We'll file a motion to show cause if they so much as whisper lien to the clerk. Also, I'm sending them a copy of the conservation easement pre-approval letter. They can try to lien the concept of birdsong." We did the hearing. It was crispy and clean, the kind of court day you frame in your mind. The judge declared the trust valid and my capacity intact, like she was signing off on weather. She turned our temporary injunction into a permanent one with a flick and a stare, then granted fees and a little extra for her trouble. "Mr. Caldwell, you may be creative, but you are not in charge." Afterward, in the hallway that had seen the start and end of 1,000 local dramas, a woman I didn't know stopped me. "My mama's house almost went the same way," she said. "Thank you for fighting."
I thanked you for saying so, and it felt almost like church. We signed the conservation easement the following week under the windmill and a sky so blue it looked like a joke. The land trust folks took a photo of me and Emily and Lily and Sandra and Reverend Alice and Janice and Dr. No and Anita at the Hill Country title and the APS worker who'd been curious and stayed for cake. We looked like a first to third grade class photo, some tall, some small, all grinning. We recorded the easement and got a copy stamped by the clerk, that satisfying thump that says, "This counts." And just when I thought my chest couldn't hold any more relief, the doorbell rang. It was Tasha. She held a file folder and a tote bag and the face of a woman who has decided to stop living someday and tell her truth on a Tuesday. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. "Always," I said, and pulled her in. We sat at the table, naturally. She laid out bank statements, emails, messages. She showed me the dates and amounts of the HELOC draws, the advances from private capital, the Venmo transfers with emojis that masked loans as pizza and tires and LOL. She showed me the line of credit with my land listed in the email as soon to be liquid, and a text from Travis that chilled me because it said out loud the quiet part. We can use the mom is sick angle again if needed. Tasha took a breath that sounded like a decision. "I want to help you," she said. "Not because I'm angry, which I am, but because he needs to lose at this. He needs to learn." I looked at her and saw myself at 32, standing in a grocery store aisle holding coupons and a soft toddler hand, realizing my marriage wasn't going to save itself. I put my hand over hers. "Okay, tell me everything." She did. It took an hour. At the end, I called Janice and put her on speaker. We listened to a woman who had learned the hard way that compliance is a hungry god. We took notes. We asked gentle questions. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. When we hung up, Tasha stared at the window. "What if he hates me?" she whispered. "He'll blame you. People who build their lives out of secrets always do when the sunlight hits. But hate isn't your problem. Safety is. Dignity is. The boys are." "You sound like a counselor," she said. "I was," I said. "Now I'm a woman with a land trust and a workshop schedule." She smiled, small, and for the first time since I'd known her, the corners of her mouth reached her eyes.
The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Mark at a bar with the investor from private capital, both of them leaning over something that looked like a contract. The caption was from a number I didn't know either. "Might want this for your scrapbook. Men talk loud when they think the world owes them quiet." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Janice, who replied with a single word, "Yum." We weren't out to ruin him. That's easy and cheap. We were out to make sure the next time he looked at a woman's life and saw a shortcut, he saw a brick wall instead. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. What came next wasn't dramatic if you watched it day by day, but if you look at it like a time lapse, it was beautiful. The board of realtors suspended Travis pending their investigation. Private capital's investor backed out and demanded immediate repayment. When he didn't get it, he did what men like that do. He sent a letter to me thinking I'd be the soft point. He learned I am not soft in the places that matter. Tasha filed for a legal separation and a temporary order that put the kids with her during the week. The judge signed it with a face that said she'd seen enough. Mark found out that the town that whispered "bless your heart" will also whisper "bless your consequences," because people will tolerate a lot, but they do not like a son who tries to push his mother off her own porch. The funniest part, if there is a funny part, is how ordinary the endgame started to look. Bills, calendars, a new budget for a woman with a backbone and 2 boys who like pancakes. Emily came over more, sometimes with stacks of second-grade art projects that looked like hope and glue. Lily drew me a picture of the windmill and wrote in the corner, "Grandma's land, don't touch." I stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a chicken.
I kept thinking I'd wake up angry one morning and not know what to do with it. But the anger turned out to be a fuel that burned clean and then gone. What it left was something else, a steadiness I haven't felt since I was 19 and thought I could do anything because no one had told me yet that my life had to be small. 2 weeks later, we got a date for the sanctions hearing against Mark for the guardianship stunt. I didn't gloat. Okay, I gloat-cooked, a lasagna so good it could end feuds. The order that came down wasn't flashy, but it was precise. He had to pay a portion of my attorney's fees. He had to post a notice on his Facebook page retracting his prayer post within 48 hours or face contempt. He had to attend a class on guardianship ethics, which sounds like something you make teenagers do when they get caught shoplifting, but I'm told is real and apparently humiliating if you think you're above instruction. He posted the retraction. It was short. It was not heartfelt. It was fine. It was a line in a ledger. After that, things got quiet in the way things do when a storm moves east. The land trust recorded the easement. I started a monthly coffee circle at church for women who wanted to talk about wills while eating muffins. APS closed their file with a note that might as well have read, "Don't mess with Ms. Caldwell." I planted fall tomatoes. Emily and I picked out a new wind chime for the porch that sounds like laughter when the breeze is right. And then, because life refuses to be a straight line, a letter arrived in a small, neat envelope with a forever stamp and a return address I knew. Mark's. Inside was 3 sentences, each one tight as a fist. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm trying to be better. M." I put it on the mantle next to the photo of Daddy in his work shirt, arm around a girl with sunburned knees and a grin too big for her face. I didn't call. I didn't text. I made soup. I sat on the porch and let the wind ring my new chime. I let the apology be a pebble in a jar, not a key to anything. Because this isn't a story about reconciliation on demand. It's a story about the sovereignty of a woman who has finally learned the difference between her job and her worth. And yet, there's one more thing. The twist. I haven't told you, because timing is everything. And the best revenge tastes better when it's served with the truth, not just victory. I set Mark's letter on the mantle and thought about how apologies, like seeds, need good soil. You can toss them on rock and call it done, but nothing will grow there. I wanted to forgive him like a mother, but I needed to protect myself like a woman who has learned, by marriage, by work, by years of being told calm down, that protection is not the opposite of love. It's what love looks like when you finally stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
Remember when I hinted there was one more thing? Something I hadn't told you yet? We're almost there. But to understand why it mattered, you need to see how the ground got tilled for it. Because the best reveals aren't surprise fireworks. They're dominoes you've been watching all along, finally tipping in the direction you prayed they would. In the quiet after the injunction, life tried to be ordinary. Ordinary looked like bells paid on time, a refrigerator that stopped making that haunted ice maker noise, and me and Sandra trying a new casserole recipe that sounded like a dare, Frito pie, but elegant. It looked like Lily practicing her recorder on my porch until the neighbor's cat lost its religion, and Emily sitting at my table grading spelling tests and sighing in that way teachers do when they've held their patience in both hands all day and need to set it down somewhere soft. I kept my routines. Morning walk, a little stretching my doctor calls preventative future-proofing, then coffee on the porch with a view of my azaleas arguing with the weather. I kept my voice memos too, not because I plan to fight forever, but because habits are anchors. And because my mind, despite rumors to the contrary, can hold a whole lot of detail when it's treated kindly. Tasha started coming by on Tuesdays. Tea Tuesdays, Lily called it, and made a sign with glitter glue that will probably live on my cabinet door until the next millennium. Tasha would bring her boys after school. The kind of chaos I pretend to dislike, but secretly live for. We'd talk logistics, lawyers, calendars, who's got soccer on Thursday, and then we'd talk feelings. Angry, scared, tired of being told it's not that bad. Sometimes she'd cry, sometimes I would. Mostly we'd laugh because women are good at finding humor in the places men think humor doesn't belong. She told me I'm not being a team player, she said once. And I said, that's because he confuses marriage with fantasy football. Janice and I kept building the polite fortress. We updated my beneficiary designations everywhere. Banks, retirement accounts, the kind of life insurance policy you forget you even have until a lawyer says, let's make sure this point's where you want. We added transfer on death deeds for the little things and wrote down exactly where the important documents live. Top drawer of the hutch in a cherry red folder labeled, if I'm not here, start here. And I did mean cherry. If it's not red enough to stop traffic, it's not red enough. The workshop rippled. Another church called. Then a Rotary Club. Then the library. I got a message from a woman in Oklahoma who watched the news clip online and wanted our packet. We mailed it with a note that said, you're not a problem, you are a person. The board of realtors asked Janice to speak to their ethics committee. Someone made a meme with my quote about difference between help and hijacking, and Lord help me, I became a Facebook auntie with a cause. And then the consequences started to show up in other people's mailboxes, not just mine. Travis, bless his eager heart, got a letter from his board that read like a bedtime story for adults who skipped the chapter called Don't Do Crime. It wasn't dramatic, no flashing lights, but it was cumulative. A suspension while they investigated, a requirement to take a course with a title so specific, you know someone wrote it because of a man just like him. Agency, authority, and the elder client, what you cannot do, even if you want to. Private capital's investor, who turned out to be a man with an LLC and a handshake for morals, sent a demand letter to Mark for repayment. I only know this because Tasha forwarded it with, does this look serious? And Janice said, it looks like someone who found their brake pedal after flooring it for a mile. Mark's professional world started shrinking. When you build your house out of favors and bravado, the first rain makes the drywall buckle. He was asked to take a pause at work. A friend told me the word reputation came up more than once. He called Emily to complain. He's always seen her as the family switchboard, and she told him, in a voice I wish I'd had at 35, I'm not passing messages anymore. Call Mom if you're going to be kind. Otherwise, call your reflection. I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Then, a Sunday afternoon, he knocked. I opened the door and stood there, screen between us. He looked smaller. Or maybe that was just what humility looks like when it tries on a man who hasn't bought it in his size before. Mom, he said, and the word sounded less like a tool this time and more like an address. Yes, I said. If he wanted warm, he'd have to make his own. He said he was going to sell the truck, the big one. He needs the cash. He's working out a payment plan with the investor and with your lawyer. He swallowed. He's trying.
I hope so, I said, for your boys. He nodded. He looked at his shoes. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said quickly, like he knew I'd been bracing. I came to tell you I start counseling on Tuesday. I blinked. With who? Pastor Alice gave me a list, he said, almost sheepish. I picked a man so you wouldn't think I went in there to charm a woman. Not that I could charm a woman anymore, not the ones who matter. Good, I said, and meant it like a prayer I've learned to keep simple. Counseling is work. If you do it, it'll show. He nodded again, tighter. Okay, bye, Mom. He left. I sat down at my kitchen table and let my whole body exhale. I didn't call Janice to celebrate. This wasn't that. This was a pebble in a jar. 2 days later, a different knock. the kind that says official. The constable again, polite as pie, a new set of papers, a small claim suit Mark filed of all things, to recover, wait for it, emotional distress because I had publicly humiliated him with the workshop. I didn't know whether to laugh or knit him a consequence. Janice did the laughing for me. "This one's a gift," she said, flipping through. "He filed it pro se. The judge'll eat this for breakfast and still have room for a donut. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and if we're feeling spicy, we'll ask for our time." "Are we feeling spicy?" I asked. "I woke up spicy," she said, "and I have a new suit." We went. The judge, different courtroom, different woman, same sensible shoes, listened for 8 minutes, looked at Mark like she was trying to locate the grown-up inside him, and dismissed it with prejudice. "Sir," she said gently, and I almost loved her, "embarrassment is not a cause of action when Mama tells the truth without using your name." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. While the courts snipped loose ends, the land trust called. The appraiser had finished the conservation easement valuation. Now, I'm not telling you numbers because this is the internet and I was raised right, but it was generous in that way stewardship work sometimes is, acknowledging the value of not building as a kind of building. Janice explained the tax credit options to me like she was teaching first period, slow, clear, no condescension. "You don't have to use it all," she said. "You can carry some forward, or donate part, or sell part to a farmer who could use it." It felt like the opposite of what Mark had tried to do, money as a result of protection, not a reason for harm. I decided to donate a slice of the credit to the School District Foundation for Teacher Grants, because I will go to my grave believing that good chalk and patience can save a town. And another slice to a fund that fixes old windmills on ranches so cattle and coyotes and people can drink. I told Lily, and she said, "Grandma, that's like adding lives to a video game." Which is not how I would have put it, but she's not wrong. The night after the appraiser's call, I cleaned out a drawer I hadn't opened in years. The junk one every kitchen has, full of rubber bands the color of old banana peels and birthday candles that had been put out so many times they should get a pension. Underneath the tangle of extension cords, I found an old cigar box of Daddy's. Inside, a pocket knife, 4 wheat pennies, and a folded paper so thin it felt like onion skin. The notary addendum I had remembered about the footbridge and the culvert was there, but tucked behind it was something else. A copy of a letter on onion skin, carbon copied, addressed to Daddy from the original owner's attorney. Short and plain as a fence post. Reversionary interest retained with respect to mineral leasing of the spring parcel. Any conveyance purporting to alienate without Caldwell matriarch's written consent is null and void. I had to read it 3 times before it lined up in my head. Reversionary interest, mineral leasing, the spring parcel. I called Janice at 8:43 p.m., which is my limit for bothering professionals, and read it to her. She was quiet for a beat, then said, "Do you want the law nerd answer or the dance around the living room answer?" "Both," I said, grinning. "Law nerd? If that reversionary interest was recorded somewhere, and if the mineral leasing rights were carved out, we have a situation where any attempt to lease without your consent would revert that interest back to the original terms.
Dance answer? Remember how I told you I love when men create their own consequences? If Mark had succeeded in pretending to sell or lease anything tied to that spring without your signature, he would have triggered a clause that made his deal crumble like a stale cookie.
I laughed, loud and mean and thrilled. So the land itself would have spit him out? In so many words, she said. We'll verify the record. But Linda, this is, poetic. I didn't sleep much that night, but this time because my joy had a tiny motor in it. The dirt remembers. The paper remembers. The women remember. We'd been building fences he couldn't see, and one of them was older than both of us wanted to admit. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The next morning, before we could even get to the county clerk to chase down ancient filings, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, from one mama to another. The body, I saw your workshop on TV. My son works with a man named Travis, and I think your boy is in deeper than, oops, I got excited. I know something I don't want to know. Can we talk? We met at the library, back corner, where the nonfiction meets the biographies, because that felt about right. She was 60-ish, cardiganed, sensible. She slid a folder across the table like we were in a spy movie. Travis is my sister's kid. Good boy, not always careful. He told me about your case because I'm always telling the family to stop cutting corners. I told him to leave you alone. Then he told me about the guy they call PC, the investor. That man is trouble with a return address. I opened the folder. Think transfers. A text exchange between PC and a number saved as M that made my stomach drop a little. Language about pressure her and we can use church and rehab optics. An email draft from Travis to PC he'd obviously never sent because it was still in his Google account, full of fear. I don't want to do this. It's her land. He says she's out of it, but the lawyer scares me. And then, this is where I had to set the paper down. Photos from a motivational dinner where PC had a whiteboard with bullet points, leverage shame, family as enforcement, get signatures when emotions are high. I breathed in through my nose the way my therapist taught me in 2004 when I thought my life was going to implode. Then I looked up at the woman. Why give me this? She said, because I have sons. And because sometimes the story you tell yourself about your boy needs to be edited by reality. Travis is taking his lumps. He deserves them. But that other man, he needs daylight. We gave Janice the folder. She opened a new file in her head. I can see it. A place for men who think ethics are quaint. She sent a bar complaint draft to a friend to review, and because apparently my village knows no jurisdictional boundaries, Reverend Alice called a buddy on the county attorney's staff who said, diplomatically, we don't comment on ongoing matters, which is lawyer for, we're already looking. Mark didn't know about any of this. He was busy, I assume, putting out fires he started with both hands. He sent Tasha a bouquet, store-bought roses, the kind you get when you're hoping the red will do the talking, and a card that read, we were supposed to be a team. She texted me a picture, and then a picture of the bouquet and her kitchen trash can. I'll compost them. They can be useful in the only way they know how. The day after the library folder landed, Janice and I found the old filing. We had to go down to the records room, the one that smells like dust and promises, and ask a clerk who knows my birthday now. There it was, in a book with pages that make that thick whisper sound when you turn them. Reversionary interest on the spring parcel, reserved to the Caldwell matriarch, recorded in 1958 and re-recorded in 1981 with the new legal description after a survey fixed a corner post. I could have kissed the page. I did not. The clerk gave me a look like she's had to clean up lipstick before. Linda, Janice said, tapping the margin with a neat fingernail, this is a teaching tool.
It's also a backstop. It means even if some Yahoo had muscled your signature, the land itself had a safeguard Daddy probably didn't think would be used this way, but he'd still be proud of it. We made certified copies, the kind with the seal that makes grown men behave, and I put one in the cherry folder. We called the land trust folks who promptly told their lawyer, who promptly asked for a copy for their files, which is lawyer for my heart just grew 3 sizes and I need to make sure it sticks.
And because the world loves a good thematic loop, that afternoon, Pastor Alice asked if I'd come to the legislative hearing after all, the one Janice had mentioned weeks ago. They bumped up the date, she said. Can you be ready to speak for 3 minutes? I can speak for 3 hours, I said, but I'll sit on my hands and make it 3 minutes. We drove to the Capitol in an old church van with air conditioning that tried its best and snacks that did heavy lifting. Our little crew, me, Janice with her rolling case, Sandra with a Tupperware of brownies that could start a war, Emily with her teacher bag and her watch set 5 minutes fast. In the rotunda, everything echoed. Women in suits and sensible shoes stood in little clusters, leaning in. You could smell the part where change tries to be polite because it knows it's about to get loud. When my turn came, I took a breath and did what I do, told the story plain. On Mother's Day, I began, my children staged an intervention with a notary in the car. They told me I was an alcoholic. I drink more coffee than wine. They slid papers across a table that would have transferred my land to my son temporarily, with a pre-title file already open under my legal description. I'm 66. I'm not confused. I was almost robbed with a hug. I told them about the trust, about the injunction, about the workshop with the folding chairs and the donated carrot cake. I didn't name names. It wasn't that kind of room. But I looked the committee members in the eye. Men and women who, if they had mothers, needed to go home with this story in their pockets and said, make it harder to do what they tried to do. Make conservatorships rarer and cleaner. Make notaries refuse to sit in cars on holidays for signatures that smell like smoke. Give title companies more teeth to swat at deals that feel wrong, and give women like me a pamphlet in every doctor's office. Here's how to not lose your life while you're busy living it. Afterward, in the hallway, a reporter asked for a quote. I said, I want my son to be okay. I do, but I want your mother to be okay too. If my story helps your mom keep her house because your cousin gets ambitious, then good. That's worth every Facebook comment. That night, driving home in the dark, where headlights make everything a little holy, I thought about the one more thing I'd promised you. We were right up against it. The dominoes were in motion. The men who thought they were writing my ending had run out of ink. And he was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The one more thing arrived on a Thursday morning in an envelope the color of tooth enamel. It was from a bank I hadn't used in a decade, addressed to me and to a person I didn't recognize, Linda R. Caldwell, and let's call him friend of Mark. Inside was a notice of denial. Someone had attempted to open a line of credit against anticipated proceeds from sale of real property, using my address and a copy of my driver's license. My stomach dropped, then came back with company, fury, focus. The letter included a copy of the ID they'd flagged. It was my face, my name, my address, and a signature that looked like someone who's seen my handwriting once tried to remember it from memory. The photo was grainy, as if it had been taken of a printout. The expiration date was wrong. I called Janice. She listened, quiet. That particular quiet she uses when the air gets serious. We're not playing anymore, she said. And it wasn't a threat. It was a decision. Bring me the letter, bring me the envelope. Don't touch anything else in it. I sat at my table and waited for her, like a woman who knows patience is a kind of action. When she arrived, we put the letter in a clear sleeve like it was an artifact, which it was. She called the bank's fraud department on speaker, introduced herself with her bar number, and said, "We'd like to help you help us."
They were helpful. They told us the application had come from an IP address tied to a co-working space across town, and that the co-applicant was known to them from a previous flagged application. They emailed us a copy of the application packet, my fake ID, a forged affidavit of authority, and an authorization supposedly from me to my agent, Mark Caldwell, to act on my behalf. We didn't say his name. We didn't have to. Janice hung up and looked at me. "Linda, we're going to the DA." "I don't want my son arrested," I said reflexively, the way mothers do when their hearts try to parent their brains.
"We're not asking for cuffs," she said gently. "We're asking for a line in the sand. Diversion is a thing. Restitution is a thing. But the law needs to touch this. If we let it slide, the next woman doesn't get the benefit of your fight." I nodded. The calm came like it always does for me. Second wave, after the first breaks and rolls back. "Okay," I said. "Let's put the law where the love can't reach." We made an appointment. We brought our scrapbook. Trust, injunction, capacity letter, conservation easement, Mother's Day transcript, Travis folder from the library lady, bank denial. The intake officer listened and took notes. The assistant DA came in and said the sentence I didn't know I'd been waiting to hear: "You did everything right." They asked if I would participate in mediation if that's what it took: restitution, apology, a program. "Yes," I said, "because I'm still me under all this. I want change. Consequences are the vehicle." They opened a case. They called the bank. They pulled the IP logs. They spoke to the co-working space manager who, God bless small-town business people who talk, said, "Oh, him? He's here Tuesdays and Thursdays. Loud voice, big watch." They asked for the security footage from the day the application was filed. They got it. And that, friends, is where the truth turned from theory to picture. Black and white, time-stamped. My son, on a Thursday, at 10:43 a.m., on a long table under Edison bulbs, with PC leaning over his shoulder and a man I didn't know pointing at a screen. A printer in the corner spitting out paper. A notary stamp in a hand that wasn't attached to anyone with a conscience that day. A forged affidavit set down to dry. I didn't watch the footage. Janice did. She told me what mattered. She did not hang cruelty on it. "He looked tired," she said, "and frantic." The DA offered a pre-charge diversion if he admitted the attempt, paid restitution for costs, attended a financial ethics course. I did not know that existed. Apparently it's like traffic school for people who treat lines like suggestions. Did 50 hours of community service with Adult Protective Services, and wrote a letter acknowledging what he did specifically and why it was wrong. If he completed it, it would stay off a record that could ruin the rest of his life. If he refused, we'd proceed. He accepted. His letter arrived a month later. Not 3 lines this time, 3 pages, specific. No ifs, no buts. He apologized to me for using my love as leverage. He apologized to Emily for forcing her into the middle. He apologized to Tasha for making her lie to people she loved. He apologized to Sandra for underestimating the force of a neighbor with a red pen. He apologized to women he'd never met but had abstracted into obstacles. He apologized to the dirt. "Mom," he wrote, "you always told me that secrets grow mold. I have been moldy a long time. I am trying to be a window." I cried, finally and thoroughly, not because I'd been holding out for his redemption arc, but because I could finally believe that my story didn't need to carry his anymore. I called Janice and read her a paragraph. She said, "That's a good letter," in the same tone she used for motion granted. I put the letter in the cherry folder because even apologies need a place to be handled gently. And just when I thought the road was going to straighten out, the one more thing I promised you showed up like a comet I'd been seeing the tail of this whole time without realizing it. The bank denial had a detail I hadn't told you yet, because I was saving it for when you'd appreciate it like I did. The co-applicant on the fraudulent line of credit wasn't PC. It wasn't Travis. It wasn't even one of Mark's loud friends. It was a name I hadn't heard in 25 years. The man who owned the parcel 2 fences down from Daddy. The one who fought the county over a drainage ditch in '97 and swore he'd reclaim what should have been mine someday. His son was on the school board now. The son was at my workshop. I'll tell you how that tangled knot unspooled. How men who think the world owes them shortcuts end up tripping over the ribbons of their own gifts. I'll tell you what we did with that discovery and how a school board meeting turned into a moment I will remember until I die. But that is for the next part, because, like any good casserole, the last layer needs its own oven time. I took that bank notice and the name on it, the neighbor's boy who grew into a school board man, and set it on the counter like it might sprout legs and explain itself. Funny thing about a name you haven't said out loud in 25 years? It brings a whole county fair of smells and sounds with it. His daddy used to chew gum like it owed him money. He and mine argued about fence lines and laughed about it later. That family always wanted more water, more access, more say. I could hear Daddy in my head, amused and a little weary. They'll try to cut a pie that ain't theirs, Lindy. Keep your knife clean.
Janice kept hers clean. We sat at my table, she with her legal pad and me with my coffee, and we walked it through like women who have raised teenagers. We assumed there were more layers and that none of them were tidy. 2 tracks, she said, drawing a line down the page. Family, public. Family is already on a leash. Injunction, diversion, restitution. Public is this co-applicant. If he's on the school board and trying to monetize your land even one step removed, that's a conflict problem with the capital C. Worst case for him, criminal. Best case, resignation and a stern letter. How do we prove it without starting a food fight? I asked. We don't need a fight, she said. We need paper. Texas Public Information Act, Open Meetings Act, board policies, procurement rules. If they discussed land acquisition in closed session under 551.072, fine, that's normal. But emails, texts between him and PC about flipping, that's sunshine material. She dictated requests like she was ordering off a menu. All communications between board member X and PC or any LLCs tied to him, drafts of agenda items referencing spring parcel or my legal description, any real property acquisition appraisals from the last 6 months, and a copy of their conflict of interest disclosures. We CC'd the superintendent, the board attorney, and a records clerk, who, according to Sandra, could process a request with one hand and stir queso with the other. While those requests percolated, I called Reverend Alice. You know that workshop clip? The anchor who came out? She's been trying to book you for a follow-up, Alice said. You're trending with the aunties. I laughed. Tell her I'll sit down, but I want to be surgical. No names, just documents. And I want it to air after the board meeting, not before. Righteous and strategic, my 2 favorite flavors. In the meantime, life took on what my therapist once called the dignity of errands. I had a dentist appointment, the dog needed her nails clipped, I helped Emily cut out 30 paper turkeys for her classroom bulletin board because the district bought the kind of scissors that make teachers want to unionize. Tasha and her boys came over for Tea Tuesday and told me the younger one is now obsessed with windmills, real ones, and wants a windmill birthday cake. I said I'd make one, then Googled for an hour like I wasn't 66 and had survived Jell-O molds. Mark started his community service. APS put him with a crew that helped seniors move out of bad leases and into safe apartments. The first week, he hauled boxes for a woman whose son hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. The second week, he fixed a closet rod for a man who cried when a coat fit on a hanger again. He sent me a text.
Not long, not dramatic. Doing my hours, it's humbling. I wrote back, "Good. Work has a way of making a man." The records from the school district came back with that bureaucratic thump. Emails printed in grayscale, sticky notes stapled sideways, a cover letter that had clearly been proofed by someone with an ulcer. Janice and I sat down with highlighters. You ever seen a pattern appear under lemon juice under heat? That's what it felt like. There it was, PC emailing board member X, the neighbor's son, from a private account. Let's circle back on the spring parcel after we confirm the seller's timeline. X replying, "Appraisal looks friendly. If your guy can deliver title in 30, we can schedule X succession and move to open vote next month." Then one from PC to Travis, CCing X's personal email, not the district one, sloppy. "We can close faster if family cooperates. Optics manageable. Medical narrative, etc." And God help me, one from X to PC. "Keep my name off texts. Use email. School board phone is open records." He put that in writing. He put that in writing. Janice circled it with a slow, delighted pen. "That'll preach," she said. There were drafts of agenda language, too. "Consider and take possible action to authorize superintendent to negotiate and execute contract for purchase of real property for transportation facility. X succession, Texas Government Code 551.072. They'd ordered an appraisal early, before the intervention. The appraisal had a picture of my windmill on the cover, like a school photo you didn't consent to. And tucked in the back, a little footnote about spring parcel would require resolution of reversionary interest. Seller to cure. Seller to cure. That was me. That was the onion skin letter Daddy saved. The dirt remembers. The paper remembers. Men think nobody reads footnotes. Women build cases out of them. We took all that and made a tidy packet. No adjectives, just facts. We added the reversionary interest copy with the clerk stamp. We added the denial letter from the bank, redacting the account numbers like we were modest and mean. We added a timeline that would make a good Netflix storyboard. Mother's Day, pre-title, notary in the car, workshop, public information requests, paper trail with the consistency of a bad decision.
Then I ironed my blouse with the tiny blue flowers again, my victory uniform at this point, and went to the school board meeting. If you've never been to one, you should go. It's like watching democracy try on bifocals. The room smelled like floor cleaner and patience. Teachers with tote bags lined the back wall. Dads in baseball caps did that leg bounce thing. A row of teen volunteers rolled their eyes at life like only the immortal can. I filled out a blue speaker card for public comment and waited. They did the pledge. They did the student of the month. Adorable kid who wants to be a veterinarian and also a rock star. Do both, baby. Then they opened public comment. They called my name. I stepped up, placed my packet on the little lectern and smiled, the way Southern women do when we are about to pitch a polite fit. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Linda Ruth Caldwell. I live at address. I taught your children emotional regulation for 30 years, so I'll practice what I preached. I'm going to be calm and specific." I held up the cover of the appraisal with my windmill on it. This is my windmill. It's on my land. I'm not here to argue about whether the district needs a transportation facility. I'm here to inform you, on the record, that any member of this board who has had private communications with the individual referred to in these documents as PC regarding acquisition of my property, while simultaneously participating in agenda preparation for that acquisition, has a conflict of interest that is not hypothetical. I will not say names. I don't need to. The documents speak. I slid the packet to the board clerk. Additionally, this spring parcel, referenced on page 27, the footnote says,
Seller to cure reversionary interest. The seller is me. The reversionary interest belongs to a Caldwell matriarch, me. It cannot be cured without my signature, which you don't have and will not get. Any attempt to proceed on the assumption that you can cure it by purchase from someone else is a waste of taxpayer time and money. I paused, looked at them each in the eye like they were second graders who just discovered the thrill of lying. I am not anti-school. I am pro-clean hands. You could have heard a cough drop fall. The board attorney did that whisper into his hand thing. Board member X stared at me with a look I recognized. The oh no look of a man who just realized his emails are about to be read by people who read for a living. My 3 minutes were up. I closed with the same line I'd been using like a benediction all summer. There's a difference between help and a hijacking. Choose help. Then I stepped away, and the room exhaled with me. They went into executive session after a brisk agenda shuffle that would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. Journalists in the back began quietly texting. Teachers resumed grading papers with pens that did not hesitate. And he was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The follow-up news story aired that night. Me in my blue blouse, the anchor's voice pitched in that tone people use when they're giving you vegetables with butter on them. She didn't name the board member either. She didn't have to. She said documents obtained via public records. She said conflict of interest concerns. She said appraisal prepared prior to public vote. They cut to a clip of me at the microphone and then to Janice, who explained the Open Meetings Act in 60 seconds like she was teaching the cool kids after school. The next morning, board member X announced he was stepping back to spend more time with family. He folded like a lawn chair. PC issued a statement so vague you could have poured it on pancakes. The superintendent sent a district-wide email reminding everyone that we hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards. Translation: we're all going to a training next week. Pack a lunch. It would have been enough, but the universe wanted to tie a bow with ribbon that whistled. Remember that onion skin letter about mineral leasing on the spring parcel? The reversionary interest? Janice filed a memorandum with it in the county records just to make sure anyone searching saw it in neon. She also sent a courtesy copy to the water district manager Daddy had scribbled about on that separate note I found in the cigar box. If trouble comes for the water, call June M. June turned out to be retired now, but still as sharp as barbed wire and twice as useful. She remembered Daddy. He always brought kolaches to meetings, and he insisted they leave the plum ones for the secretary. She also remembered the special permit he had acquired in 1981 when the state was doing their water adjudications, the one that tied a tiny, precious spring flow allocation to our family, not the dirt, because Daddy didn't trust men to be kind to each other. It's unusual but solid, June said. Whoever thought they'd flip your land to the district and then turn around and lease the water to the same district would have run nose first into a wall. They can't separate the spring from the matriarch's pan. He who holds the pan holds the water.
I laughed until I hiccuped. So Daddy left me a squirt gun that turns into a hydrant? More like a faucet with a very specific handle, she said. Either way, it's yours. We sent that to the board attorney too, nicely. We wish you luck siding your bus barn, Janice wrote. Not here. Meanwhile, PC, our investor with a peacocking complex, tried one more trick, a lawyer letter, hinting at defamation because I'd tarred his business interests with my public activism. This is where God truly shows favor to middle-aged women with a good attorney.
Janice sent back an anti-slap notice so brisk and pretty, it should have been framed. "We welcome your suit," she wrote. "We'll bring popcorn and our fee petition." We never heard from him again. I wish I could tell you Mark wilted in shame at the board news, but growth is an ugly plant for the first few inches. He called that night, voice stiff. "You didn't have to do that in public," he said. "I didn't name him," I said. "He named himself." "You could have called," he muttered. "I made documents," I said. "I built fences. If that feels like exposure, it's because you're used to moving in shadows." He sighed. "I did my community service shift today," he offered, changing the subject without the decency to use a turn signal. "We packed grocery boxes for seniors. A lady cried because someone put a can of peaches in there." "Peaches can get you through a lot," I said. He was quiet long enough I thought he'd hung up. Then, "Mom, I'm sorry you had to do any of this." "I'm sorry I had to too," I said, softening, "because I am both a woman and a mother, and those things live together in my chest without conflict." "I know," he said. "Good night." Little pebbles, one by one. Midweek, I took Lily out to the land with 2 sandwiches and a bottle of lemonade. We walked to the spring Daddy named with so much honor you'd think it was the Colorado. It was more a seep most months, a whisper of water that got loud after rain. We sat on the limestone and let dragonflies write cursive in the air. "Lily," said, picking at the sandwich she claimed not to like and then ate entirely, "do you think Uncle Mark is bad?" "No. I think he did bad things." "How do you know the difference?" "Bad sticks," I said. "People can put it down." She nodded like 11-year-olds nod when they understand more than you think they do. "I'm glad we're keeping the water," she added, utterly practical. "I like the sound." "Me too," I said. "It sounds like patience." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. 2 Saturdays later, we held another workshop, this time at the library, the one with the smell of old paper and possibility. We called it Paper Armor. We had a notary come, explain into a microphone that she refuses car signings on holidays and why. We had a young assistant DA, not mine, walk through what exploitation looks like when you take the romance out of it. We had June from the Water District, she wore a scarf with tiny blue fish, explain reversionary interests to a room full of women who left ready to read every footnote anyone ever tried to hand them. In the Q&A, a man in the back, 40, restless, stood up and asked, "What if the person you're protecting is you?" My heart did a little lurch. It was board member X's son, the one on the school board. He was thin around the edges, tired and trying. He explained, haltingly, that he'd been pulled into something because he thought getting things done mattered more than doing them right. He said he was stepping down completely. He said he was sorry. I believed him as much as I needed to, and no more. Forgiveness is not a sale. It's a garden. You don't hand over the hose just because someone says they're thirsty. After the workshop, the anchor cornered me again. "You keep making good TV," she said, half teasing. "I'm trying to make good neighbors. The TV just shows up." A week later came the town cherry on top. The school district tabled the transportation facility agenda item and selected a parcel on the other side of the river, a place with no spring, no matriarch, no history trying to save itself. The superintendent sent me a note, handwritten, that said, "Thank you for your passion and your documentation." Translation, "Thank you for making me solve a problem without a scandal." Life inhaled. I baked again. Banana bread this time, because we had tipped toward cozy. Tasha brought the boys. We decorated cookies with windmill arms that fell off and were glued back on with frosting, which felt thematically perfect. Emily graded spelling tests and drained a glass of lemonade like a woman who had run a marathon made of small steps. Sandra fell asleep in my armchair listening to the Astros game on low volume. Peace is loud only when you've been living with a siren in your ear.
I started sleeping through the night again. And then, because you already know that in my life there's always a then, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address and a stamp that looked like it had been licked by someone in a hurry. Inside was a photocopy of a check made out to PC's LLC for a consulting fee, signed by a name I recognized from the bank denial as the co-applicant. Memo line, Land Acquisition Prep. Dated the week before Mother's Day. Attached was a sticky note. In neat, almost girlish print, he said it was a donation to a school initiative. I believed him. I don't anymore. Janice called it a bow we didn't even have to tie. The DA called it interesting, in a tone that suggested there were words he preferred to use among friends. I called it dessert. Not because I'm bloodthirsty, despite rumors, but because it tasted like confirmation that I hadn't been crazy, petty, vindictive, or any of the other words women get called when we refuse to roll over. I'd been right. And being right doesn't fix a childhood, or a marriage, or a son, but it makes it easier to breathe. The sanctions hearing on Mark on the guardianship filing came and went. The judge assessed fees and made him take the class with the terrible name. He did. He sent me a selfie, grim but upright, in a classroom with a PowerPoint slide titled, "You are not the sheriff of your parents." I snorted coffee. His diversion program closed successfully. The DA sent a letter, matter resolved. Janice framed it like a trophy and put it on her office wall under a sticky note that said, "Don't seat notaries in cars." On a Tuesday evening, Mark came over with the boys. He stood on my porch, the way men do when they are trying to look both smaller and sturdy. "We brought ice cream," he said. "The real kind, not that keto mess." We ate on the porch. The boys told me about dinosaurs like they were breaking news. Lily challenged them to a cartwheel contest and won because she's scrappy. After they left, Mark hung back. "Mom," he said, and this time the word sounded like home-worn soft. "What do you want from me?" Not today, in general. It was the question he should have asked before Mother's Day, before the notary, before the folder. It was the question I didn't know I needed to hear until it landed like a quilt. "I want you to be kind out loud," I said, "and I want you to stop trying to win. A decent life isn't a scoreboard." He nodded. "I'm trying." "I see that," I said. "Keep trying when no one's watching. That's the difference." He looked at the windmill necklace Emily gave me, and then out at the yard where the new chime made luck noises. "Do you think we'll ever—" He struggled for a word like a man looking for a tool in the wrong drawer. "Be okay?" I supplied. "We're okay today. Tomorrow we'll try again." He smiled, small and real. "Okay." He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because the last piece, the one I kept you waiting on, wasn't about boardrooms or emails or injunctions. It was about a promise Daddy tucked into a kitchen drawer and forgot to brag about, trusting that someday the right woman would open it at the right moment and know exactly what to do. It was about the spring parcel, yes, and the water district, and an old letter that used the phrase, "to be opened if trouble comes for the water." I found that envelope the day after the boys' ice cream. Under the drawer liner with daisies on it, I put down in 1991. It was soft with time, sealed with tape older than Lily. On the front, "For my girl, when men with trucks start measuring your creek." Inside was a single index card in Daddy's block letters. Call Hank at the paper. Tell him to run the bridge story again. Remind June about the culvert. If they push, call the tribe. The tribe. I sat down like the kitchen chair had jumped and caught me. Of course. The creek runs into a river that runs through land that isn't ours, wasn't ever ours. And Daddy, who taught me how to scrub potatoes and how to sit quietly so birds will forget you're there, had gone and made a promise, quiet and sturdy, with people who were there before anyone thought to call a place Caldwell. I called Hank. He retired years ago. He answered like he'd been waiting. I wondered when you'd find that, he said, and laughed like men do when they get to be part of a story that ends right. I called June. Oh, your daddy, she sighed. He was a card. And then I placed one more call, to a number June gave me with the kind of reverence you use at a funeral or a birth, to the cultural resources liaison for the tribe whose elders had walked that spring long before our fence line existed. I told her who I was and what I'd found. I told her about the reversionary interest and the footbridge and the men with trucks measuring my creek in with their ambitions.
She said, "We've been waiting for this too." What came next changed more than a bus barn. It changed my land, my town, and the way my grandchildren will tell this story at Thanksgiving when they're grown and rolling their eyes at the idea that life was ever not like this. Want to hear it? I called the tribal liaison, the way you call a neighbor when there's smoke at the fence. Urgent, respectful, and with the sense that maybe you should have picked up the phone yesterday. Her name was Mariah. Her voice had that calm that doesn't ask for quiet so much as it makes it. I told her about the spring, the onion skin letter, the footbridge, the men with trucks who measure creeks like they're simple. She listened. She didn't rush me. Then she said, "We know your water." That sentence goosebumped my arms. "You do?" "Our elders walked there," she said. "The little rise above your spring was a resting place along a trail long before your father had a windmill there. The water remembers. So do we." I sat down at my kitchen table before my knees took matters into their own hands. "I found a note from my daddy," I said, and read it to her, the one about Hank at the paper, the bridge story, the culvert, the tribe. When I finished, she let out a soft breath. "Your father was a stubborn man with good instincts," she said. "He understood something most men miss. The land isn't a thing. It's an agreement." We set a time to meet, and she asked if I minded if she brought 2 elders and the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, THPO, which, Lord help me, sounds like something you buy for plantar fasciitis, but in this context felt like a blessing. "We'll come quiet," she said. "We'll bring tobacco and bread. We'll stand where your people stood and where ours did too." When I hung up, I called Hank at the paper. He answered on the second ring with that voice small-town journalists have, like an old truck that runs exactly because it refuses not to. "Well, Miss Linda," he said, "I figured I'd hear from you before the pecans dropped." He found the bridge story in an archive that smelled like dust and church basements. The old piece about the widow who walked to the creek every evening and the men who promised that a road wouldn't take her water. "We can run it again with an update," he said, "if you got one." "Oh, I've got one," I said. "And Hank spelled my name right. I want my grandkids to find this 20 years from now and say, 'She meant it.'" He chuckled. "Yes, ma'am." 2 days later, Mariah pulled up in a white SUV that looked like it had seen every dirt road in 3 counties. With her came a man with hair the color of winter fields, a woman with eyes that held more weather than any forecast, and a younger man with a clipboard who introduced himself as the THPO, but said, "Just call me Seth." Sandra brought kolaches, because my people bring food to anything that feels like ceremony. We walked out to the spring in a slow, respectful line. The day was that kind of Texas fall where the air pretends to be crisp for 30 minutes at dawn and then remembers who it is.
We stood at the rise above the water. Mariah closed her eyes. The elders said soft words I didn't recognize but felt in my ribs. Seth took notes without looking like he was stealing anything. "We have a process," Mariah said finally. "We can prepare a cultural resources report that identifies this as a place of significance to our people. If the state ever tries to cite anything here with public money, they'll have to talk to us and to you. We can also help you add cultural protections to your easement, things even a clever developer won't enjoy reading." "Bless every syllable," I said. "And the bridge?" the elder woman asked, opening her eyes and pinning me with a look my grandmother would have recognized. "Your father's promise. I was hoping we would build it, not because we have to, but because I like keeping promises. He's gone. I'm the matriarch now. That's the hat, whether it fits or not." She smiled, a small thing that felt like sunlight. "Then we build it." We picked a spot where the bank was low and the water, when it remembered itself, ran clear enough to show stones that looked like coins. Seth knelt and sketched. Mariah talked logistics, materials, permitting, who'd call who at the county so no one showed up pretending we were hiding a marina. The elders took their time and then, like the best aunties, started delegating. "You bring the bread when we dedicate it, and coffee. Not that fancy stuff, the kind that tastes like morning." Back in town, Hank's reprint of the Bridge story led the Sunday paper with a photo of my windmill and a caption that made my father sound like a character from a novel. He promised his neighbor's widow a footbridge and a culvert. He delivered both. The editorial board, that's 4 people and a dog named Scooter, ran a little box beside it. "How we keep what we say." It felt like a benediction and a dare.
Emily brought the paper over, waved it like a victory flag. Lily took a highlighter to my name because she said some names deserve neon. Tasha texted a photo, her boys pointing at the windmill in the picture, chins up like little men in training, except sweeter. The school board, bless their startled hearts, sent a polite notice to the paper. "We have identified an alternative site for the transportation facility." Translation, "We heard you, we like our seats." The superintendent's memo about ethics trainings had footnotes and links. Seth laughed when I showed him. "Funny how fast policy shows up when women show the receipts," he said. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. Mark stayed on his path. He did his hours, he saw his counselor. He texted me short things that felt like pebbles in a jar. "Did yard work for Miss C today. She fed me a biscuit." Or, "Talk to my boy's teacher without making it about me." He was learning the art of unimportance, which is the secret door into being useful. I invited him to the bridge dedication. He said yes like a man who knows attendance isn't forgiveness, it's practice. On a bright Saturday, we gathered at the spring. Me, Emily, Lily, Sandra, Reverend Alice in sensible sandals, Janice with a camera, Dr. No with sunscreen, Anita from the title office with a folding chair, the APS worker on her day off, the anchor with a small crew she promised would be quiet, and a good handful from the tribe, Mariah, the elders in their Sunday best, Seth with a clipboard and a grin he couldn't hide. Tasha brought the boys in little button-downs because she's the kind of woman who marks the day with fabric as well as memory. The bridge was simple, 2 cedar stringers, planks planed smooth, a low rail so even a tottering matriarch could cross without risking dignity. We'd put a small plaque at one end that read, "The water remembers, we do too." Below it, in smaller type, "In honor of those who walked before us and those who will." We opened with quiet, a prayer from Reverend Alice, words from Mariah in her language and then in mine. A short memory from the elder who looked at me like she was measuring my backbone and found it acceptable. "Places matter," she said simply, "and the way people behave around them matters more." I cut a ribbon with a pair of scissors older than Tasha's marriage. We crossed. Lily squeezed my hand like she was the one steadying me, which made my heart feel like the sky had put weights on it so it wouldn't drift off. On the far side, Mark stood. I hadn't seen him walk up. He'd come late or quiet.
He looked like himself, but less curated. He held nothing in his hands, which is how I knew he'd been listening. He waited until the elders finished speaking, until the cameras blinked off, until the crowd eddied. Then he said, not loud, "Mom, may I cross with you?" I took his arm. We stepped onto the first plank. It bowed under our weight, just a hair, and held. After the dedication, Mariah pulled me aside. "We'll file the report," she said. "We'll give you a copy for your cherry folder." "You're learning," I teased. "I learn fast when aunties are involved," she said. "One more thing. There's a grant we can help you get. Interpretive signage, a bench, maybe a docent program for school field trips. Your story teaches. Let's make it teach more kids than your grandchildren." "You're dangerous," I said, delighted. "Get me a clipboard." The follow-up news story that night didn't linger on me, which I loved. It showed the elders' faces, the bridge, a little boy testing the rail, the creek making its shy music. The anchor read a sentence I'm going to put on my wall. "Sometimes justice looks like paperwork, sometimes it looks like a plank over water." After the cameras left and people wandered back to their Saturdays, Tasha stayed behind. She handed me a small envelope, her handwriting on the front. "My lawyer," she said. "I'm filing. I thought I would tell you before Mark does." I hugged her without the performance people sometimes need. "Good," I said. "You're allowed to want a life you can recognize." She nodded, eyes wet but not drowning. "I'll bring the boys Tuesday. We're making windmill cupcakes and I need your frosting." "You'll get more than my frosting," I said. "You'll get my mixer and my patience." She laughed. "I still owe you both from May." We walked to the trucks together. The elder woman raised a hand to me, a benediction without a sermon. I felt like a girl again and 100 years old, which is when you know you've lived. That Monday, Hank's paper ran a photo of the bridge with the headline, "A Promise Kept." The opening paragraph was cleaner than the first run, less sentimental, more exact. Decades ago, a man promised a woman she would never be cut off from her water. Today, his daughter kept that promise, with help. The byline said Hank and staff, which I suspect meant Scooter supervised.
The week rolled on. Fruit ripened and went soft. I took Lily to the dentist. Emily and I made a grocery list that looked like two women plotting joy. Cream, butter, fresh herbs, a scandalous amount of garlic. Life was, yes, ordinary, but with a tilt, like the land itself had leaned our way. And then, because I guess the universe decided my revenge story could do community service too, I got a call from the library director. "We've been talking," she said. "We want to host a series with you. Paper armor, but bigger. 6 weeks. Trusts, POAs, social media scams, water rights for landowners, your THPO friend on cultural resources. Also, one night just for stories. We'll call it How We Keep Our Places." I said what I say when the work lines up with the ache. Yes, get me a calendar and a good extension cord. Halfway through the series, Mark texted. He'd run into the investor, PC, at a coffee shop. The man tried to be slick, tried to chum the waters. Mark said he shook his head and left. I felt stupid. Then I felt clean. I didn't respond for an hour, not because I was playing games, but because I've learned to let a decent day stand on its own legs. When I did reply, it was simple. "Proud of you. Keep walking." And I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because one of the school board's open records packets, the one with the appraisal drafts and the seller to cure footnote, had a CC we hadn't noticed. Not to the superintendent, not to a lawyer, but to a PAC treasurer, smarmy as 3-day hair gel, who'd been raising money for school improvements. The photocopied check in my anonymous envelope, same treasurer, same memo line, same week. Janice connected dots like she'd been born with a Sharpie in her hand. The DA's office, which had kept a polite distance after Mark's diversion closed, called and asked if I would be willing to sit down one more time. Just to clarify timelines, the ADA said.
In Texas, that sentence can cover a multitude of interested questions. We brought the cherry folder, of course. We brought Hank's clippings, because sometimes you bring a witness with a masthead. We brought Mariah's cultural report, newly filed, newly stamped, a lovely official bow on a much older ribbon. The ADA took notes. He asked careful questions. He did not tip his hand. He didn't have to. 2 weeks later, the pack treasurer resigned to spend more time focusing on family commitments, which is what men say when the grown-ups have stepped into the room with flashlights. That might sound like sidelights to my central story, but it all felt connected. My revenge wasn't a laser beam. It was dawn. The light hit corners I hadn't aimed at, and I'm not sorry. I won't lie, there were days the fury tried to ask for its old room back. I'd be in the canned goods aisle and see a man in a polo with a watch too loud and think, I could have been ruined if I'd been less steady, less stubborn, less lucky. Then I'd turn down the next aisle and see someone from the workshop picking up a packet of paper armor handouts from the library display, and my heart would calm down like a dog who remembers its person is right there. Thanksgiving came. Emily did the turkey because she likes the control. I handled sides because I like the mess. Sandra brought the green bean casserole that could start a brawl if there weren't 2 pans. Reverend Alice stopped by early with rolls and gossip. The boys chased the dog until the dog declared a truce by hiding under my bed. Tasha arrived with her smile softer and her shoulders lower. Mark came last. No flourishes, just his hands full. Pie, ice cream, a bouquet not from the grocery store. He made eye contact with the women and meant it. We ate. We talked about the Astros like we were on payroll. We avoided land for almost an hour. For a family that's practically a land-based nonprofit at this point, that's a miracle. After pie, Mark asked if he could say grace. Belated, a little ragged. We let him. He thanked God for water and bridges and women who say no. He didn't thank God for second chances because he's not there yet, but I heard the shape of it in his throat. When dishes were stacked and leftovers plotted, Lily dragged out a big butcher paper roll and markers. She said, "We're drawing the story." Grandma talks, we draw. So I talked them through it. The whole arc, minus the parts that don't belong in kids' ears. Mother's Day, the folder, the secret emails, the trust, the injunction, the workshop, the bridge, the tribe, the board, the men who resigned, the water that remembered. The boys drew the windmill and gave it eyes. Lily drew the bridge and wrote underneath in block letters, "Do not cross without kindness." Mark drew himself with a little frown and then erased the mouth and drew it again. It came out neutral. That's how growth goes some months. Neutral is victory.
As the house settled into that post-feast peace where people nap in unnatural poses and no one judges, I took my coffee out to the porch. The new chime made it small music. I thought about my father, about the matriarch whose footbridge became my promise, about the elders who smiled like my backbone had made the right sound. I thought about the DA's letter, neat as a sermon. I thought about PC, off somewhere licking his ego. I thought about the tribe's report, now as much a part of the land's record as the caliche under my tires. And I thought about me, a woman men once called too much, who turned out to be exactly enough. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because even at the end of a good story, there's room for a coda. 2, actually. 1 small, 1 the size of a county. The small one. Tasha's windmill cupcakes were a hit at her boy's party. She sent me a photo of his frosting-smeared face and a text that said, "He wished for more bridges." I sent back, "Same." She replied, "Paperwork filed. Mediation set for January." Then, "Thank you. Not for anything in particular, for the air she was breathing that day." The big one, The library series ended with that stories night. The fellowship hall was full and smelled like sugar and purpose. We invited anyone to stand up and tell a 3-minute tale. A time you protected what was yours without becoming what hurt you. A woman, about my age, hair like mine if it had dates with hot rollers, stood and said, "My brother tried to make me sign my farm away during chemo. I didn't. I lived. I still have my farm." A younger man said, "I used to think being the eldest son meant being the CEO. Now I think it means being the custodian." An elder from Mariah's community said, quietly, with the power of a creek that cuts limestone, "When the water is safe, the people can rest." We ended with a plan. A fund, tiny at first, but real, administered by the library and the church together, with the tribe as a partner, to pay for consultations for elders who need an attorney before the vultures circle. We named it, what else, but the Bridge Fund. Donations came in 20s and hundreds, and one check that made me sit down and breathe, from an anonymous person whose note said, "For your father's promise and for the women who keep such things." I went home tired, the good kind, the kind where your body knows the day mattered. I put the cherry folder back in its drawer and patted it like a good dog. I set the newspaper clipping with the bridge photo next to Daddy's onion skin letter and Mariah's report. My life looked like paperwork and pie plates. It looked like peace. And if you're waiting for the shocking final shoe, bless your thriller-loving heart, I don't have gore. I have vindication. I have consequences on paper and kindness in motion. I have a son paying fees and carrying boxes and learning to apologize without asking for a coupon. I have a daughter who knows her voice and uses it at school board microphones. I have a granddaughter who writes rules on bridges and expects the world to honor them. I have a tribe that calls my water ours, and I have learned that ours is a word that gets bigger the better you use it. There is one last twist, but it isn't a knife. It's a key. Hank called me last week, said, "You got one more in you?" He's doing a series on keepers of place, that old journalist trick of turning nouns into verbs and making them march. He wants to profile the bridge and the fund, the workshops, and the way the land trust has started using our easement as a model. He said, "It's not sexy." I said, "Neither is a fence that holds Hank, but men hang hats on them." He laughed. "Bring Scooter a kolache," he said. And I said, "I know I will." If you've stuck with me this far, through the family theater on Mother's Day, through the lies stitched to love, through the dazzling boredom of filing things where they can matter, through the little joys that make a woman's life feel like it belongs to her, then you deserve the clean ending. I did not lose my land. I gained a bridge. I built fences you can see and some you can't. I taught a room full of aunties how to armor themselves with paper. I watched a school board remember its job. I watched my son remember his. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The very last geese, the tribe asked if we'd consider a yearly gathering at the spring. Songs and stories, students and elders, bread and coffee, one little bridge with a plaque that reminds us, the water remembers. We said yes, of course. We're having the first one in May. I told Mariah we'd pick the Sunday after Mother's Day. She laughed until she had to wipe her eyes with her sleeve.
We'll call it Matriarch's Day. We'll bring kolaches for Scooter. We'll let the boys run like they're trying to catch the horizon. We'll take a photo with the bridge and my necklace and Lily's sign, and the caption will not be about revenge. It will be about a woman in her 60s who refused to be an avenue for someone else's shortcut, and about all the people who showed up with planks and nails and the faith that if you build the right thing, the right people will cross it. I said yes to Matriarch's Day before I even knew where we'd put the coffee urns. That's the thing about being a woman in her 60s with a mission. You learn to say yes, then make a list.
We set the date for the Sunday after Mother's Day, poetry level symmetry, and the planning hum started up again in my chest like a well-tuned fan. In the weeks leading up, life clicked into a new normal that didn't feel like a reaction anymore. The Bridge Fund paid for its first 2 consults, a widow whose nephew accidentally lifted her checkbook, and a retired nurse being love-bombed by a man who said God told him to help with her finances. God called later, he said absolutely not. Janice and I polished our paper armor handouts into a spiral-bound workbook the library could check out like a casserole dish from a church kitchen. Dr. No added a 1-page capacity letter fax sheet with big print and zero nonsense. The tribe filed their cultural report. The land trust added a paragraph to our easement about protecting the resting rise and the spring's viewshed, which sounds fancy and mostly means no one's building an eyesore where the water remembers. Tasha's mediation date arrived. She came over the night before with a legal pad and a jaw set like a woman who's finally done worrying about being pleasant. We reheated lasagna, revenge fuel, ran her through talking points, kids' routine, the house, debt, and practiced saying, "No, that doesn't work for me," until she didn't flinch. She walked into the conference room the next morning in a navy dress that looked like competence and walked out 5 hours later with a parenting schedule that respected bedtime and a plan to unwind the HELOC without turning her kitchen into a courtroom. She texted me one word: held. I wrote back, amen. Travis, the eager realtor, took his medicine. The board handed down a suspension and a mandatory ethics course with a title so pointed you could pin a corsage on it. He emailed me a short apology. I got swept up. I forgot to ask whether the woman in the middle wanted any of this. I'm sorry. I didn't need it, but I saved it anyway. Men learning out loud helps other men. PC, our peacocking investor, faded into the middle distance where men go when sunlight makes them shy. The DA never told me what did or didn't happen around his orbit. They wouldn't. What I did see, because small towns keep their ears honest, was that his PAC folded like laundry and his name dropped off donor lists like a bad habit. Consequences don't always clatter. Sometimes they just stop answering their own phone. Mark kept stacking pebbles. He sold the big truck and started driving something with good mileage and no personality, which is frankly the sexiest thing a man in trouble can drive. He finished his community service and on his own kept a Saturday slot helping seniors move. He texted less and showed up more. Early to pickups, on time to counseling, present at his boys' school programs where he clapped at the appropriate volume and didn't try to talk to the principal about opportunities. He asked Emily for coffee, listened instead of performing, and sent me a screenshot of the budgeting app on his phone like a teenager showing proof of life. It was the oddest kind of pride, quiet and domestic, a relief that didn't demand a parade. One afternoon, he stood on my porch with a manila envelope and that look men get when they're about to do something frighteningly adult. He said, "I'd like to sign whatever you need me to sign, so I'm not in your will." I said, "You're already not. You took yourself out." He said, "I know. I want the paperwork to match." We met Janice for 30 minutes, just enough time to execute a clean little waiver. He'd never contest, never claim, never gum up the works. He signed with a real pen and a steady hand. When we walked out, he looked taller, like some weight he'd been pretending not to feel had finally dropped off behind him. He said, "Thanks for not making it a scene." I said, "You don't get to make scenes when you're cleaning up. You get to make progress." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. The week before Matriarch's Day, I drove out to the land with Lily to check the bridge and set out the folding signs. We carried a can of clear sealant, 2 brushes, and an embarrassing number of snacks. Lily narrated like an 11-year-old nature show host. And here we see the grandma, a persistent species, mocking her territory with signage and hydration. We laughed until we had to sit down. We brushed the sealant on the rail with care, the way women of my line have varnished furniture and dreams. The plaque caught the sun. The water remembers. We do too.
We tested the footbridge. It held. I always like to check. Matriarch's Day itself felt like the kind of small miracle church ladies know how to orchestrate. Tables dressed in plastic cloths weighed down with river rocks, a coffee line that moved fast, kids released with chalk to draw dragonflies on limestone, while elders talked about the time the creek ran knee-deep to a child and only ankle-deep to a cowboy. Hymn fragments braided with tribal songs in a way that would make musicologists nod. Collages on paper plates. Sturdy hugs. No drama. Mariah spoke first, then Reverend Alice, then me. I kept it short, because we were not baptizing a grievance. We were dedicating a promise. We are not here, I said, because men did something wrong last year. We are here because women did something right for a long time. We kept our receipts. We drew our lines. We learned to call our water by its full name. We invited anyone with a matriarch to say their name out loud. For 10 minutes, the air filled with Mama and Aunt May and Abuela Carmen and Miss Dot and Nana June. Even Scooter, Hank's dog, barked on cue. Back in town, Hank ran his Keepers of Place feature like he promised. The photo he chose wasn't of me. It was of 3 hands on the bridge rail. Mine with sunspots, Lily's marker-stained, and the elder woman's, strong and delicate, a river map in tendons. The caption said, "Hands that hold." He spelled my name right. My father would have clipped it and stuck it on the fridge with a chicken magnet. I did exactly that. Then came the part of a long story folks rarely tell because it doesn't dance well on camera. The quiet, durable aftermath. The Bridge Fund got a small grant from a foundation with a name like a ranch and the heart of a school librarian. Janice trained 3 more attorneys in the paper armor method so the load didn't sit on one woman's desk. The library series turned into a county-wide rotation. I got to be the zippy aunt who opens each night with a 5-minute story and then hands the mic to the expert. The cultural report from the tribe went up on the state database, which is bureaucratic poetry for anyone trying to cite something dumb here has to fill out 15 extra forms and face an auntie with a clipboard. At home, little repairs became symbols. Mark replaced the loose porch step without making it a conversation about stepping up. Emily finally let me teach her how to make pie crust that doesn't blow a gasket. Tasha found an apartment with light and a dishwasher that actually does its job. She brought the boys over to test the wind on the chime and teach them to count dragonflies. Lily wrote a poem that made me cry at the kitchen table and pretend I'd spilled coffee on myself. I am 66. I don't need to pretend. I cried because the poem held. In late summer, a letter arrived with a gold seal. The legislative committee sent the new bill text, the one they started working on after those hearings in the rotunda. It tightened temporary guardianship standards, made it harder to waggle a random concern into a court order, and required notaries to note who waited in cars on holidays and why. They called the section on notary best practices the bridge provision. I took a picture of the page and sent it to Mariah, to Janice, to Dr. No, to Anita, Title, to the APS worker, to Reverend Alice, to Sandra, to Hank, to June, to the elder who told me we were building more than a footbridge. The responses came back fast and fizzy. Anita texted, "New policy at our office, no car notaries ever." I printed the bill and taped it to the coffee maker. Janice sent a row of bridge emojis. Mariah called and said, "The water remembers. Now the law will too." He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. If this were a movie, I suppose what he deserved would be handcuffs or a monologue where he begged on a porch in the rain. But I didn't need cinematic. I needed accountable. The last big piece of Mark's consequences was small enough to fit in a bank envelope. He paid the final installment of my attorney's fees, every penny the court ordered. He included a note, handwritten, steady, paid, not forgotten. I put it in the cherry folder. Then, because grace isn't a coupon, and I'm allowed to be kind when I want to be, I wrote him a separate note on a card with blue hydrangeas. Received, not weaponized.
He came by that night with the boys to show me the small tomato plant they'd talked the hardware store guy into selling them for half off. We sat on the steps while the kids negotiated who got to water and how to measure turns in seconds, not feelings. Mark watched, tugged at the brim of his cap, then said, almost conversationally, "When I'm tempted to tell a story that makes me the hero, I hear your voice say, 'Bring receipts or bring silence.' That's not my voice. That's adulthood." He smiled. "Either way, it's louder than it used to be." "Good," I said. "Turn it into a habit." He nodded, then tried to hand me cash for the groceries he assumed I had bought for dinner. I shook my head. "Feed your boys," I said. "You can bring the paper plates next time." He laughed. "Deal." The night before the first day of school, Tasha texted a photo of the boys in their new shoes and a note that said, "We're good. Not perfect. Good." Emily sent me a shot of her classroom bulletin board with "You can do hard things" in letters she cut out while watching old episodes of Murder, She Wrote, because our bloodline loves a mystery solved by a woman with sensible shoes. As for me, I did the smallest, bravest thing. I rested. Not from work, I still bake and plan and teach and keep the coffee hot, but from the kind of hypervigilance that makes you narrate your day like a courtroom transcript. The trust is recorded. The easement is recorded. The injunction is permanent. The water's name is written down in places men cannot casually edit. I can breathe. On Matriarch's Day the following year, we did it again. New aunties, new kolaches, same bridge. Lily read her poem. The elder set her hand on my shoulder and said, "We knew you'd keep it." The boys ran laps and counted dragonflies, and I counted the women who didn't flinch at the word legal anymore. The anchor came, took a picture, and then, praise be, stayed and listened instead of asking for a soundbite. Hank brought Scooter and a new reporter to learn the smell of a story. Ink, coffee, sweat, bread. After the crowd thinned, Mark walked up. No envelope, no performance. Just him. He touched the plaque with 2 fingers and said, "I brought a wrench." He glanced at me, waited for the old reflex to spark, then added, "To fix, not to take." "That's the only kind of wrench welcome here," I said. We tightened a rail, just because. We crossed the bridge. It bowed the way wood does. It held. If you came to this story for blood, I'm sorry. I don't have carnage. I have a stubborn woman who chose paper over panic, neighbors over secrecy, and a footbridge over a fist. I have legal consequences that sat just right, not cruel, not soft. I have a son who learned that the hero move isn't win, it's repair. I have a daughter who found her public voice. I have a daughter-in-law who lit her own candle and didn't apologize when the light showed other people's mess. I have a tribe whose words braided into ours without asking permission, just asking presence. I have a town that puts the bridge provision on a coffee maker because some policy needs caffeine. And because I promised you the truth all the way to the end, here it is. Revenge, when you're my age, isn't about watching someone burn. It's about refusing to hand them the match. It's about offering them water when they finally realize the fire was theirs all along, and knowing, clear-eyed, that you don't have to let them in the kitchen to do it. I'm 66. I own my land. I keep my receipts. I sleep fine. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? Where would you have drawn your lines? And what bridge would you have built?
So another story of my grandmother has ended, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.